Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, September 7th, 2017 meeting of the Morro Bay Harbor Advisory Board. It's being held at the Veterans Memorial Building in Morro Bay. And we'll begin with, we are a quorum. We're 100% quorum this evening. And then we'll move on to a moment of silence, please. Thank you. And stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Gene, you want to lead us off?
Sure. Great. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the next the next agenda item is announcements and presentations. We have announcements, if any announcements from the board. We'll start with Bill.
Yeah, I have two announcements. One, coming up Saturday, September 30th, we're going to hold the 8th annual Jesse King Memorial Paddle Race, Saturday, September 30th, 2017. This is a memorial, and it's going to benefit the Friends of the Harbor Department and the Morro Bay Junior Guards. If you need any more information, please go to www.thepaddleboardcompany.com events, and you can sign up there for the event. I think Eric has a staff report. He might discuss some more things about it. Second thing I have on my agenda is on the 16th of September, the community is holding a community party, and it's going to be held at Cerrito Peak, aka Eagle Rock, Saturday, September 16th from 2 to 5 p.m. It's really Cerrito Place between Olive and Shasta, park on the surrounding streets. This is to celebrate the opportunity to preserve this treasure, and we'll have information on plans for a conservancy to buy it. We have food. We have a monarch expert, Jessica Griffiths, there. We have snakes and bugs with Dennis Sheridan. We have a historical society display. We have plein air demo art supplies, music by Zen Mountain poets, and John Birch, who's a Native American composer, and more. If you have any more information on this, go to www.morrobayopen.org. September 16th, 2 to 5 p.m., Saving Cerrito Peak. Thank you.
Dana?
Yeah, I'll just put a plug in for a couple of water events coming up for the Harbor Festival next month. There is the Dragon Boats are going to have a race, or be doing races, and also the Yacht Club will be doing the Harbor Festival Cup that they've been doing for the last few years. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun. It'll be good to have a couple actual water events during the Harbor Fest.
And who participates in the Festival Cup?
The Festival Cup is open to anyone, and the class of boat is the day sailor class, which the deed of gift specifies it is the class that is raced the most in the bay. And so that is every year. If it changes someday, then that's the new class that it'll be.
And can anybody with a day sailor participate?
Absolutely.
And how do they do that?
They come down to the Yacht Club and come to the skipper's meeting, sign up, and go racing.
Okay, so contact the Yacht Club or contact you?
They can contact the Yacht Club.
Okay, thanks. Neil?
No announcements.
Lynn?
None.
Pete?
Yeah, I've got three items here. One, there's been lots of life in the bay lately. Anchovies are showing up. They were a couple of inches in size 3 weeks ago or a month ago. Now they're up 4 or 5 inches, and it's really cool to see these little schools of anchovy come through. Lots of pelicans in the bay now, so your boat's going to get covered with little white spots everywhere. And seals are in the bay chasing the bait. So And then there's also been reports of thresher sharks in the bay, but I think that was a misinformation. Basically, there's been a lot of leopard sharks in the bay, and up on the screen is some photos of the leopard sharks. Leopard sharks are really slow growing. A 5-foot or 4 or 5-foot male may be 10 to 15 years old before it reaches maturity. A female may be 15 years old before it reaches maturity. So, they're kind of an old, slowly. There's not a whole lot of them around. So, if you're going to catch one, I just kind of let it go again myself. So that's my feeling.
And they are resident, are they not?
Yes, they are. Yes. And then on the construction side of the Morro Bay and the harbor, there's probably a dozen projects that are in the way of working their way through the process, but nothing immediately that I know of right away. I also believe that there is going to be a auction from the Morro Bay Harbor Department. Is that correct, Eric? That's a thumbs up. So, on what day? 24th of September. Where? In your yard. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. My announcement, I have one, and that is that on October 14th, which is a Saturday, the Community Foundation of Estero Bay, which raises funds to assist low-income kids to participate in organized youth sports and enrichment programs, is holding its premier annual fundraiser, which is Morro Bay Sings. There's live music, there is dinner, there is a silent auction, there's a live auction, and the auction items are pretty exciting this year. And you can to find out more about it, you'll see some advertisements around town. If you're interested in tickets, go on to the Community Foundation of Estero Bay's website, and you can learn all about it. Also, this evening, as the board knows, but perhaps all of the public doesn't know, the fisherman's seat on the Harbor Advisory Board has 3 alternates. And this evening we have with us Pete Griffin. Pete, I think is this your first time with us?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
I'm a fisherman that have been operating out of the harbor here for 22 years. I have the vessel Ellie's Way, and I'm here in support of not just the harbor, but Jeremiah and the Fishermen's Association as well.
What are the fisheries that you participate in these days?
Nearshore lobster and crab.
Lobster? We have lobster?
No.
Oh. I got momentarily excited.
Now, wait a minute. I've seen lobster shells on the sand spit before, so there must be a few.
There's a small population.
Yes.
How do you know they didn't come from the supermarket?
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for being with us this evening. Okay, and then we have a presentation this evening, and shall I pronounce it in Japanese or in English?
Whatever you prefer.
Okay, Kirihima is here with us, and she's with the Morro Bay National Estuary Program and is going to give us a presentation, our annual presentation, about the state of the bay. And thank you.
Thanks. So I'm the Assistant Director with the Morro Bay National Estuary Program, and every 3 years we compile all available data and we try to answer some of the questions that members of the public often ask us. So it's things like, is it safe to swim in the bay? Is it safe to eat shellfish? What might climate change? What might those impacts be on the bay? So we take that data and we compile it into a report card called the State of the Bay Report. So we have a series of events to promote those results, and then we also take the show on the road and we present it to organizations like yours to share the information. So just a quick little bit about us. The Morro Bay National Estuary Program, we are a nonprofit. We are not a regulatory agency. There are 28 estuaries of national significance around the country, and we have the goal of working collaboratively with partners like municipalities, agencies, private landowners, private citizens to protect and restore Morro Bay. So our program has 3 main focus areas: restoration and conservation, education and outreach, and monitoring and research. So the first set of data I want to talk to you today about is safe swimming. So that's bacteria numbers in the bay. So in order for it to be safe to swim in a natural water body like Morro Bay, the bacteria levels need to be low. There are many pathogens such as bacteria, viruses, and protozoa that could make a swimmer ill if they came in contact with contaminated water. It's impossible to test for every single one of them, so what we do instead is we test for what are called indicator bacteria. And those are bacteria that tend to be present when fecal contamination from warm-blooded animals is present. So what we test for in the bay is Enterococcus. So our volunteers go out each month. They go to 8 bay shoreline sites that were selected because they're locations with a lot of recreational contact. They collect samples and they take them to the Morro Bay Wastewater Treatment Plant lab, which has generously given us space for the past dozen years. So we process the samples there, we incubate them overnight, and then we come back the next day to read the results. And so what this map shows are the 8 sites where we sample each month. These are averaged scores from a dozen years of data collection, monthly data collection. And the green dots, the green color on the dots indicates good bacteria levels. So that means sites where the bacteria is usually low enough such that it's safe for swimming. And then we have 2 sites that have a fair bacteria rating. And so the site at Pasadena has exceedances of bacteria, has high bacteria levels in about 15% of the samples. And then Baywood Pier has exceedances or high bacteria levels in about 20% of the samples. So with this testing, you don't know what the source of the bacteria is. It could very well be wildlife. And there's probably also a little bit of a factor of runoff from land at both of these locations. So it's important to remember, no matter what the water quality is like when we test regularly after a storm, bacteria levels are always high, so it's a good idea to stay out of the water for 72 hours after a storm. So a project we're involved in to help address bacteria in the bay is called the Mutts for the Bay program. So if you've walked the Embarcadero or you've been to a park in the city, you see those dispensers that are giving out free plastic bags, and dog owners can use them to pick up after their pets. So we have a network of 27 of those dispensers around town. They are funded by private donations, and some are sponsored by businesses or local nonprofits. And then those dispensers are stocked and maintained by an army of volunteers. And so last year, over 350,000 of those bags were given out for free. And so if you think about it, that's quite a bit of bacteria that was prevented from reaching our bay waters. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about eelgrass. So as you all know, eelgrass is a flowering plant that we're fortunate enough to have in our bay. It serves a lot of important functions in our bay, and so it's very distressing that we've had pretty severe losses in acreage over the past 10 years. So these 2 maps show eelgrass presence. The bright green indicates eelgrass, and it shows a side-by-side comparison of 2007, when we had 344 acres of eelgrass, as compared to 2015, where we had less than 20 acres of eelgrass. And so looking at this map, you can see that the eelgrass along the fringes near the mouth of the bay is pretty stable. The eelgrass that was present in 2007 is, for the most part, still there. And where most of the losses occurred is in the mid and the south portions of the bay. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what we're up to as far as eelgrass is concerned. So quite a lot of monitoring. We're going out to the remaining beds and intensively monitoring them to try and keep track of their health and ensure that they're still doing well. And then we also had a consultant come out and do a bay-wide map of subtidal eelgrass. They came out in April and they drove around with their sonar. And then for the areas that were too shallow for a boat, they flew a drone and they captured aerial imagery, and then they seamed that together into a single map of eelgrass presence in the bay. So the bright yellow areas on the map show the presence of eelgrass in April of this year, and then the bright blue shows where eelgrass was present back in 2007, which was kind of our peak acreage time. And so what this map shows, everything more towards the mouth of the bay is pretty stable. What was there in 2007 is pretty much still there. What's interesting and noteworthy in this map is that south of State Park Marina, there's small patches of eelgrass popping up, and that has not been seen in the bay for the last several years. So it appears that this eelgrass is rather ephemeral. It comes and it goes, but it's encouraging to see any eelgrass at all in an area where there has been none for so long. So there's quite a bit of research going on. The fellow on the top right is Dr. Ryan Welter with the physics department at Cal Poly. He's got water quality sensors arrays, one set in the back bay, kind of near the oyster farms, and one towards the bay mouth, and he's comparing the water quality in those two regions. The diver on the bottom right is collecting eelgrass samples for Dr. Jen Yost, a botanist at Cal Poly, and she was looking at eelgrass genetics. And then the folks on the boat there are doing fish trawls, and they're comparing fish population numbers from before the eelgrass decline as compared to after the eelgrass decline. Now, as I'm sure you all are all aware, we were involved with some wide-scale restoration projects in 2012 through 2014 to try and transplant eelgrass from the front bay, where it's still doing well, to the mid and the back bay, where we've had most of the loss. And the monitoring we conducted, unfortunately, showed that most of that eelgrass had not survived. And so in 2015, instead of doing another round of planting, we decided to change our approach and focus more on monitoring and research. But this year we decided the time was right to do a small-scale experimental transplant. So we did this in March and repeated it in July, where we harvested 600 plants from Coleman Beach and then transplanted them in 2 different areas, which are represented by the yellow stars on this map. So this site we call our 4-bay site. It's kind of across from Tidelands near Grassy Island. And the eelgrass that was planted there is doing very well. So it's kind of hard to see in this photo, but the eelgrass was planted in 1 by 1 meter square plots. And then we go back and we visit the plants to check on them, and we have had a high survival rate, and then the plants that are there have grown quite a bit, and they've also expanded beyond the original square where they were planted. Now, in comparison, this site in the mid-bay, it's hard to tell in this photo because we had to take it in the very early morning hours because the tides have not been very cooperative this year, but there is one lonely eelgrass plant left in that plot. So the survival in the mid-bay was unfortunately extremely low, and the plants that did survive are stunted. They're not growing. So, I mean, this gives us information, though, for future work. It shows us where eelgrass does well and where it does not. So the plan is for future small-scale plantings to try and gather more information. So if you want to learn more about eelgrass, we're hosting a science talk on October 12th in the evening from 6 to 8 at the Slow Botanical Garden. It's free. It's open to the public. We'll have 3 speakers, someone from the estuary program talking about the history and the monitoring. Dr. Jen Yost will be talking about her genetics research, and John Roser will be talking about brant geese. So we hope you will connect with us. There's a lot more information than I could present in the time that I had, so please pick up a copy of the report. I brought some today. Come to our office down in the Embarcadero. Come see our nature center. Pick up a copy of the report. We have a lot of events going on. If you sign up for our blog, you'll learn about those events, what we're up to in the field, and things like that. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
And before you leave the mic, where is the office, please? So people
We're
know?
at 601 Embarcadero in the Marina Square building. So we're upstairs in that building. We have most of that floor, so like near windows on the water.
Okay, and you're open for visitation?
Yes, the building is open from 10 to 6 every day.
Okay, and if you could stay there, and we'll poll the board and see if they have any questions or comments. Pete? No. Lynn?
Yes, since the treatment plant, it's on. Since the treatment plant in Los Osos has been installed, have you noticed any changes, or is it too early?
I'd say it's too early. We're monitoring nitrate levels in those freshwater seeps along the fringes in the south portion of the bay, and we are expecting to see drops in nitrate levels. The California Department of Public Health is monitoring bacteria from the seeps and are also expecting to see changes. I don't know, Neil, if you know what their data has shown, but they're also monitoring. So we're tracking that because we feel that those are going to be strong indicators of the impact of the plant.
Thank you.
Neil?
Yeah, along with that, thank you for your presentation, by the way. My question was going to be about those two sites that are in Los Osos. Are on your map, they were yellow, fair condition. Are those from seeps, or are they point source pollutions that you guys test? Or
So at Baywood Pier, if you've been down there, you see that large concrete culvert that's coming out right there. It's got things coming out of it pretty much year-round, not only when it's raining. So
Right.
there's probably runoff going on somewhere that's ending up in the bay. So that's thought to be a contributor. But in addition, there's just a lot of wildlife in the area, right? There's a
Right.
lot of birds there, and that can also be a contributor. And then Pasadena, similarly, there's a small kind of marshy area there that had reported strange seepage coming out of it before. So that's likely a factor in addition to wildlife.
okay. Have you guys ever had or contemplated putting a budget together for genetic testing of those fecal bacteria samples to see if you could identify the source?
We have not done any of that type of work in the bay. We've experimented a little bit with it in some of the creeks in the watershed, but not in the bay.
Okay.
And the difference, please, for all of us who don't know, between a seep and a direct discharge?
Okay, so a seep is shallow groundwater, which is pushing up from the surface, kind of like a spring. And so there are freshwater seeps along the edge of the bay. They were a notorious source of bacteria in the past. And so the thought was those are shallow groundwater, and sometimes people's septic systems are pretty much sitting in the shallow groundwater. So with people no longer using the septics, then the thought is that the nitrate and the bacteria levels should drop. And then non-point source discharge is runoff from the land reaching the bay. It could be through a pipe. So, the large concrete pipes you see along the Embarcadero that put stormwater into the bay during storms, that's the non-point source runoff.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, one more.
Okay,
Okay, sorry. And the last one was regarding Jen Yost, her research that she's
Yes.
going to be discussing on October 12th at the Botanical Gardens. Does that mean that she has finished compiling all her data? Has it been? She's
Yes.
ready to full report on it. That'll be
Yes,
accessible?
so her master's student already defended her thesis,
Oh, great.
and I believe they're probably preparing to publish, so they are done with
Okay,
that project.
great.
Yes.
Thanks.
Dana? Bill?
No, just thank you very much. One question for the public. Are you, as a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, are you accepting donations and things like that for your organization? I wanted to, maybe you could share that with the public here.
Yes, we do accept donations. Some people choose to donate directly to the Mutts to the Bay program. A lot of times it's pet owners. They make use of that resource and they want to support it directly. And others just donate to the program overall for money to be spent, so to support our monitoring efforts, our restoration, and then our education and outreach. So on our website, which is our name, it's the acronym for our name, so M for Morrow, B for Bay, and then N for National, E for Estuary, and P for Program.org, and there's a donate button.
Good. And I have a couple of questions. The changes that occurred that you shared with us between the eelgrass changes between 2007 and 2015, what conditions, if any, regarding the water were monitored? Salinity, chemicals?
So Cal Poly had some sensors out during a portion of that time period. And in the analysis that's been conducted so far on the data, there hasn't been really a smoking gun identified as far as the parameters that they were monitoring for. In some parts of the world, when there's been eelgrass die-off, it's been tied to a wasting disease. And the thought is that drought helps the wasting disease. The wasting disease does not like fresh water. So if you have a normal amount of rainfall, fresh water entering the bay, it helps kind of keep that wasting disease, keep it in a more manageable level. But during drought times, you don't have as much fresh water, and so the wasting disease kind of comes out of balance, and then it can really take out the eelgrass. Now, I believe Cal Poly's ruled that out in the rainfall data that they've had. Looking at it, it did not trend with the eelgrass decline. The thought is that sediment is a likely contributor. People who've lived here for a long time have stories about how the back of the bay used to look different. It didn't used to be as mucky and silty. It was sandier. And so the thought is that finer, silty kind of material, it's stirred up more easily with wave action, and eelgrass is a photosynthesizing plant. It needs clear water in order to get enough sunlight. And so these changing sediment conditions are thought to play a role in the eelgrass decline.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And secondly, the two current test plots that you shared with us, is the water chemistry monitored, and has the water chemistry been monitored, and is there any difference in those two plots?
So the research I mentioned from the Cal Poly researcher is collecting data. He's deployed sensors early this year, and he's going to pull them in a year later, early next year, and then they'll be analyzing the data. So there is data being collected. It's just we're in the midst of it right now.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from the board? Staff? Okay. And do you have time to stick around if we sort of shuffle a couple of our agenda items, and
Certainly.
just in case?
Sure.
Lynn would like to have you join us.
Okay.
Okay, so with the board's permission, I'd like to move C3 up. And I realize that we haven't yet done the consent calendar and reports and appearances, but Ann is here, so I want to give her a heads up on that. Are you okay? Any objections to that? Okay, good. All right, thanks. All right, so that brings us to item A1, which is the approval of the minutes from the Harbor Advisory Board meeting held July 6th, 2017. To start that discussion, do I hear a motion to approve? Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Any corrections, comments on those minutes? Seeing none? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Minutes are accepted. And that brings us to item B1, which is the Harbor Department status report.
And
Correct.
I am going to defer back to the agenda public comment, general public comment, since we have a member and another member in the audience, if she wishes to make regular public comment.
Really appreciate you straightening me out on that. That's not a good thing to do. So,
Sorry.
Thank you. So we'll defer item B1 to public comment. Public comment at this time is for anything that is not on the agenda, or for any comments on an agenda item for which someone will not be able to stay. Any public comment? Seeing none? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Director.
So I guess you want my report now.
You're up.
So we started out as usual with recent department activity. Approximately the month of August, 11 emergency responses, 117 calls for assistance, 36 assists to other agencies, and 30 enforcement contacts, and 2 weather hazards. August 29th, no real incidents in and around Morro Bay that I can really speak to. We do have the fishing vessel Point Estero that went up on the rocks at Cayucas that remains there. A little out of our jurisdiction, but a Morro Bay boat. Other than that, a lot of lifeguard activity, but nothing really super noteworthy, just the standard garden variety emergency responses. On August 29th, Harbor Patrol Officer Dana Stein did go to Houston with K-38 Rescue. That's the company that does all of our jet ski rescue training. They, in addition to doing training for a lot of agencies around the country and world, really, they also go and do race course safety marshaling, and they also do relief and other efforts, and they went out to Houston on the 29th to avail themselves to any flood relief that was occurring out there. They did get hooked up with some state troopers who basically put them to work and pointed them in directions that they needed water rescue to happen, and they were pretty instrumental in several water rescues, including saving one a state trooper or a state fish and game person out there doing rescues that got in trouble in his boat, and so they were able to rescue him and get him helicoptered out. So they did some good. It was an interesting experience. If you want to pull Dana aside sometime, he's got some pretty crazy stories about working out there in Texas. But they did some good work, and they made some difference. They saved some lives, and he's safely back and kind of itching for more.
On our website, Friends of the Morro Bay Harbor Department, we have a YouTube video of Dana on his jet ski. So if anyone wants to look at that, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, they basically drove out somewhat blind and came to the first area that they looked like they needed help and found some officials and just said, "Here we are, where you need us," and they got put to work. So it was a good effort. They went out with, I think there were 4 or 6 of them total. Sean Eladio from K38 gathered up other folks from other agencies and other people she knew and trusted to bring out there. And then the state troopers with their team, they hooked them up with an ex-Navy SEAL and a Coast Guard helicopter rescue jumper for sort of their safety team, because it was a little bit Wild West out there, as you can imagine. In addition to all the good things that happened out there with people just jumping in and helping, their neighbors, there's a lot of looting and a lot of people that take advantage of that. So they needed a little bit of backup on occasion. So a bit of a Wild West mentality, but they're back. Everybody's back safe and sound. Recent council activity. At the August 8th City Council meeting, council adopted a resolution to amend the master lease for both leases at Marina Square, 7174 and 7577. Those leases had a pretty unique way of formatting the percent, calculating the annual CPI adjustments that weren't consistent with all of our other leases. So over the period of really almost a year and a half, probably 2 years, we've been negotiating with the lease site owner and coming up with a negotiated settlement on that, which we did, and basically changed the CPI calculator to the way the rest of the leases are calculated, and kicked in percent gross requirements on the northern half of that lease a year earlier than it normally would have been under the existing lease. And we also changed the lease ownership from a general partnership to a limited liability company. Just really administrative action on that one. And on August 11th, council discussed and provided direction to the Harbor Advisory Board to request the ambiguities, resolve the ambiguities in Measure D and the Working Waterfront Initiative. Council direction, it's really summated in the charts following at the end of my report. And basically, they authorized putting together a joint Harbor Advisory Board, Planning Commission, subcommittee of the subcommittees. Basically, the Planning Commission put together members of their board with our board, and they're going to be getting together tomorrow, first time tomorrow, to go over the recommendations that we as a HAB have to council to try and get joint input and analysis and recommendation that will eventually go to the General Plan Advisory Committee, which is the group that is advising the City Council on the bigger General Plan, Local Coastal Plan update. We'll have at least one meeting of the joint HAB-PC subcommittee, maybe 2, but hopefully not more than that. And tomorrow, the first one is at 3 o'clock, correct? Up at the Recreation Center, the Community Center, up on Kennedy Way.
And will you be
Studio
there?
room.
Will you be there?
Yes.
Yes.
Myself and Scott Graham will be there. Open to the public. It's a Brown Act notice meeting, which is a recommendation from the city attorney. His evaluation was, even though we as a subcommittee with our members weren't a quorum, nor was the Planning Commission by itself a quorum, once you put those two bodies together, you kick in the Brown Act, so it had to be a normal Brown Act thing, which is fine, because we're not shying away from the public light. We want input, and we want public input and participation. That's what it's all about. So that is what is happening tomorrow. And on August 22nd, the council granted conditional consent of landowner approval to TLC Family Enterprises for the redevelopment of the Off the Hook lease site, 8788. That's the lease site sandwiched between the Libertine Pub and the Boatyard buildings. We put out an RFP back in 2016 for that. As you know, we had 3 folks respond, and it got windowed down to 2, and then the council evaluated those proposals back in April and said, we want to go with TLC Family Enterprises, but you need to bring back some more detail, which we did back on the 22nd, and then so the council granted that conditional approval, which is basically permission to submit all the plans and for permitting and going through the regular land entitlement process to redevelop that lease site. They are on some pretty tight deadlines. The council wanted to see more in terms of business plan and marketing development out of TLC, so they gave until November 1st to bring that back to the city staff to evaluate, and then we'll bring that back to council hopefully in the first meeting in November. There's only one meeting in November for the city council. The second meeting doesn't happen because of Thanksgiving, but we'll be looking at that in early November. Lifeguard, junior lifeguard front, as you know, Labor Day weekend was pretty darn busy, pretty epic weather, hot, muggy. People were out in droves all over the beach. I was on the beach in Cayucos a couple of days, and I've never seen it. And if you looked at the beach cam for down here, it looked like Huntington Beach on a summer weekend. I mean, it was umbrellas and people and tents and towels everywhere. It was crazy. So busy weekend. Fortunately, nothing bad to report. A fair amount of rescues and good public contacts. That was their last weekend. The lifeguards will be on full time. They'll be going to weekends only coverage through Harborfest weekend, which is the first Saturday and Sunday in October. So we'll look for the lifeguard towers to start disappearing sometime in October. And on August 19th and 20th, we have the annual lifeguard agency competition where all agencies get together and do a little friendly competition to see who's best and work together and work collaboratively and make sure that everyone's having a good time and it's just good camaraderie. As far as Morro Bay goes, Pismo Beach was the defending champions. I wish I could report where we successfully defended our championship, but we didn't. Pismo Beach managed to get, Oceano won the overall trophy. Morro Bay got second and Pismo third. For individual entrants, our head lifeguard, Mac Reinhart, won the Iron Guard event, which is kind of the premier individual event, which is great. Adam Loans won the beach flags, which is, if you've ever watched it, you set up three little, we call them flags. They're basically little pieces of rubber tubing about 8 or 10 inches long with painted a red color or whatever. You stick them in the sand 100 yards down, you put 3 tubes in, and you make 4 guys run for them, and whoever doesn't get a tube is eliminated, and you keep doing that, and then you're down to 3 people, then you're down to 2 people, then you're down to 1 person. So Adam Loans won that. And for team events, Morby got first in the swim relay, which was out and back as a relay, just as I described it, and second in the rescue board relay. On the fishing front, I'll probably defer to Pete mostly for that, but the reports I've gotten is albacore has been pretty meager. Not a lot of fish and far offshore, and so guys haven't been having a lot of joy. Pete, you got anything to add on that?
That's the report I got.
Yeah, unfortunately. People are starting to kind of gear up for Dungeness crab again, and it's coming up on September, October is when guys are starting to prepare, and November's the beginning of that season, so they'll be starting to get themselves ready, so hopefully that'll be a good season. Recreationally, just a lot of good rockfish. I've heard there's been some decent halibut in the bay. Might have something to do with all the anchovies you've been seeing, which has been great. I went out with my son last weekend, and on Saturday, when it was all hot and sunny, to try and go cool off, and we went and trolled around hoping we'd find some bonita, but we didn't. Water was warm, sure seemed like there would be, but there wasn't anything around, but did okay in rockfish, so that's about it in the fishing front. Upcoming events, not upcoming anymore, but recently passed, Art in the Park, September 2 to 4, that's Labor Day weekend, obviously that already went by. Fall Cleanup Week is occurring right now through Morbe Garbage. For those of you that got the big bad and ugly things to throw away, you call the garbage company and they come pick up the big weird stuff on your normal garbage day. That's through the rest of this week. Taste of the Grove, September 8th. That's tomorrow, 5 to 8 p.m. That's up on one of the avocado orchards up Highway 41, a little event going on out there, and all these have websites you can go get to as well if you look on our agenda. Avocado Margarita Festival is happening this weekend, September 9th, at the city parking lot down in the Centennial Parkway area, Libertine Pub, Rose's Landing Zone down there. So look for that. That's been a pretty darn popular event, and I'm sure it will be again with music and avocados and margaritas and all sorts of other good stuff. Coastal Cleanup Day is Saturday, September 16th. You can go to EcoSlow's website for all the details on that. That's really a statewide event. EcoSlow is the organization within San Luis Obispo County that's kind of the mother hen of organizing that. I know the estuary program gets involved, More Bay Beautiful, More Bay in Bloom, all those different sort of service organizations generally get volunteers involved in that. It's a great event. September 30th and October 14th is the Slow Jazz Festival concert series, the new series that's getting put together at Giovanni's Fish Market area, the parking lot back behind Gio's between Coffee Pot and the fish dock there. He's setting up a bunch of tents and for Jazz Festival and for folks to go eat some food and go listen to some music on the bay. So new event, September 30th and October 14th. Look for that. You can go to www.fallfest for that. And as Bill said, on September 30th, we've got our 8th annual Jesse King Memorial Paddle Race. Just for anybody out there in TV that doesn't know, Jesse King was a More Bay lifeguard involved in our junior lifeguard program about a decade ago. He's also a More Bay Coast Guardsman who got out of the Coast Guard in Morro Bay. Unfortunately, he passed away in a pretty tragic diving accident. I think it was on July 3rd or July 5th, about 8 years ago now. And so that event's been occurring annually since then. His family comes down from up in extreme northeast California, and they come out for that, and we try and raise some money and awareness, and they just have a great get-together to remember Jesse by. And finally, we have our annual Harbor Department auction on September 24th at 1 o'clock. We'll be doing that out at our yard, out at the end of the dirt road. No telling what we have. I'm sure we've got some skiffs and canoes and oddball stuff. There's always some interesting things to come look at. We salvage a fair amount of stuff off the boats we demo if we can, if it's fairly easy to get off. So come out for some boating treasures on September 24th if you're looking for that kind of stuff. Down to the pending HAB status on recommendations the HAB's done. As far as anything new, fourth box down, City Council, actually, no, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead on that one. That was the Marine Service Facility. As we know, the RFQ didn't get any results. We need to put together a feasibility study for RFP for feasibility study services, so we'll be doing that and getting that in front of the council as soon as we can. Nothing really on the first page. Second page, very top of the second page, City Council involved the Harbor Advisory Board directly in consideration, incorporation of Measure D in the General Plan, Local Coastal Plan, and the Working Waterfront stuff, as I spoke earlier. We'll be having our joint Planning Commission Harbor Advisory Board meeting tomorrow, first one, and then we'll probably set another one after that if it's needed, up at the Community Center studio room from 3 to 5, so look for that. So that's moving forward. Incorporate, okay, that's same Working Waterfront, same, those are combined into one action. That, I think, is it. Yeah, that's it as far as any recent activity on any of those items. So mostly general plan, local coastal plan, looking at Measure D and Working Waterfront stuff.
Thank you.
I think that's the end of it.
Okay, questions, comments from the board? Gene?
Yeah, just an update. It's September, but before long, we're going to have winter time, and if you do have a boat out on mooring, I would suggest that you start thinking about repairing or looking at your pennant lines. Sometimes in September, we've had some pretty good storms, so just comment.
Okay. Pete, any comments or questions for the director on his report?
Echoing what this gentleman said here, we saw some lines part in Avila, earlier mornings, early season storms, the same situation. So, yeah.
Lynn? Neil?
Regarding K38, are you aware if Sean's planning on going to Florida? I wasn't sure if she had.
I don't know.
Okay. I would tell people to watch K38 if they want to help at all. I know that she doesn't always need people who have experience on PWCs, but they also need support on land, people who can help get gas or help mechanically, and also just triage people as they bring them in. And I know heading to Texas, they had some people who just drove out that had big trucks, spent their whole paycheck getting resources, filled their trucks up, and just drove out in a caravan style. So if you're interested in helping, I would recommend finding K38. You can find through the website K38watersafety.com, or you can go on their Facebook page as well. And make sure that you talk to Sean Aladia. There's other branches of K38 that aren't always the genuine one. So, but I think she might be planning on going to Florida. So.
If she's planning, she needs to go now.
I think she might have already left. I just
If
was
she
seeing if
hasn't
she had
left
any
already.
posts, because she usually posts pretty regularly, but
Yeah.
she didn't have anything up just yet. So,
I know Dana's still here.
yeah, I saw that. Anyway, there you go.
Dana?
Yeah, Eric, you guys demoed a boat, demolished a boat up on the launch ramp the other day. What boat was that?
I should have brought that up. That was a wooden boat. It was I think an ex-Navy boat of some sort, called the Monitor. It was a boat that you probably remember at our North Tee Pier for a number of years. A fellow was bringing it up coast to go north, broke down outside. Took him months to get repairs done, and in the meantime, kind of fell in love with the area and didn't want to leave and set up shop. Continued to try and refurbish the boat. Ended up pretty much selling it, walking away from it, selling it because it just ended up being too much. I mean, it's an old wooden boat that just needs a lot of work. Sold it to a younger couple who, for over about a year, put a new engine in it, rebuilt the engine, and did quite a bit of work. Got it running, brought it down to Port St. Louis, hauled it out, did a fair amount of work, then brought it back, and then they sold it, and then that person got behind, brought into the State Park Marina and got behind in the bills and basically walked away from it. So Associated Pacific, being the operators in the State Park Marina, went through and did the lien sale and got the legal ownership of it, and then we took it under our state grant program to demolish it. So probably a good thing. I mean, it was an old wooden boat just waiting to have problems. So we're kind of glad to have that one out of the gene pool. It was a problem.
How long was that boat? Do you know?
Low 50s, 48, 50 foot. Yeah. Yeah, it's good size.
Bill? Eric, I have a couple of questions, please. You briefly touched on it, but for those of us who don't know the entire definition, what, please, is a consent of landowner?
Consent of landowner is basically the landowner's permission or consent, landowner being the city of Morro Bay, to an entity to go ahead and prepare the necessary plans and documents to submit for building, redeveloping a lease site is generally where we use it. So we went out to RFP, request for proposals on off the hook lease site, and got proposals back, and basically the one that the city council chose as being the preferred plan said, okay, plan proposer, consent of landowner, you have our consent to take your plan, what you've presented to us in concept, which is a very basic overview with not real detailed drawings, but basic drawings of what they plan to do, elevations and whatnot. Take that to the city council. City council says, okay, we like it. You have our consent to move forward with that into the full entitlement process, the full redevelopment process, which will be, going to city council going to planning commission, through planning commission approval, through community development, and eventually on to coastal commission and all the other agencies, and scrape the lease site and rebuild it.
So I think the last couple of things you said answer my question, but address what I'm about to say. So it is not, in fact, a consent to do anything on the property.
Correct. It's not an entitlement process that anybody could use to go start tearing a building down or scraping something or remodeling. It's an acceptance of a plan. Now you need to go take that plan and do your full architecture and engineering and everything else you need to submit to community development, just like any other redevelopment or rebuild.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yep.
Next, what, please, is the status of the harbor dredging project, and has the Corps completely signed off on it?
The Corps has confirmed the dredging contractor's numbers as far as the quantities removed and where removed from. They are in the process of demobilization. They kind of disappeared for 2 or 3 weeks and decided to show up Labor Day weekend to re-begin their demobilization. So they start taking some things out of the water. I don't think so much on Sunday, but on Monday. So they are here and slowly but surely pulling things out. From what I understand, last October, as you know, they had all that pipe wash up on the sand spit. About 3,000 feet of it didn't wash up on the sand spit, but was not connected to the dredge anymore, so it was still anchored out there. They located that and successfully got that out. Now they've got to get all the pipe that was last actively in use leaving the harbor mouth to the near shore, which is in place where they put it, which is good. So they'll be floating that and getting that out of there. The crane and all the other equipment they've got spread around town. And then after snowy plover nesting season, which is the end of September, they need to get an approved plan for getting all their pipe off the beach. Right now, we have yet to see that plan, what they've submitted for with the Corps, but they're going to mainly have to go through state parks, because they're going to have to go through state parks to access the land out there. So we'll see what their plan is to pull it off.
Thank you. And next, I understand that there was an auction on a sailboat that is sitting down in front of the Harbor Department. And that auction brought no comers.
Would you like it?
Well, is it going to be included? Where I was headed was, is it going to be included in the auction on the 24th?
No,
That's where I was headed.
we for sailboats and the Monitor with Associated Pacific goes through. You go through the normal California state lien process, which requires a public auction, which we did. Nobody showed. Well, we had a couple people looking at it, but after they looked, they walked away and didn't come to the actual auction, which is generally at 11 o'clock on the day we prescribed. We had nobody show up to bid, and after 10 days, so even if somebody had bought it and said, yeah, I'll give you, X amount of dollars, we have a minimum amount, which is the bill that's owed on it. Even if someone were to buy it, the owner of the boat has 10 days to cure the lien. In other words, to pay off the bill that they owed to get it back out of Hawk. It's kind of like going to a pawn shop and putting something in pawn. You've got a chance to get it back. So that person still has 10 days. The clock started ticking. When did we do that? Was that on Tuesday? What was it? The 5th. So the 5th was the date that we did the auction. So they're going to have to the 15th. It's 10 calendar days. If the owner doesn't show up, then we get sent paperwork from our lien company, and we take that to DMV and process it into the city's name, and it's going to go to the chopping boat. We'll end up going to the chopping block, the demo block, unless you want it.
Does
I'm going to keep trying.
That would make my wife pretty happy. Does the inside look like the outside?
Yeah, it looks pretty similar, except there's probably more water on the inside than the outside. Well, actually, there's not more, because it wouldn't be a float if there's more on the inside, but there's a good amount of water on the inside.
Does that mean that its propulsion engine is non-operational?
There is a hunk of iron back there.
Okay, good. Thank you. And next, status, please, of the fish cleaning station upgrade.
That will occur when we do our whole launch ramp redevelopment, which is, I've got engineering getting going on that, where Laura and I were just talking before the meeting, the approval of all my consultant contracts to get the engineers and architects. And so the process on that will be over the next 4 to 6 months. We'll get it to about a 60% design stage. We'll be working with DBW much of the steps of the way as we go to make sure everything's in accordance with what they want. Once we get to about 60%, then we'll be able to go to Coastal Commission for permits, and Army Corps and everywhere else we need to go for permits. And at 60%, we should also be able to get a good engineer's estimate of the cost. And so we'll work that up, and then we'll work on the permits, and then work on going to DBW for the next set of funding in the next fiscal year, which hopefully we can get to by April, which is when we need to apply by the end of April to get into the next funding cycle, which we intend to do. And assuming that all works good and that gets approved, then we go through final engineering and design through next summer, and hopefully can get permits by then and get into construction. Winter time obviously is going to be best from a usage standpoint, because it's going to be pretty disruptive. So we'd hope to get in construction in December 2018, January 2019, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
So the fish cleaning station is enveloped in that whole project.
Okay. So when folks, and every time I'm down there, somebody asks me when that's going to happen. So thank you for all that. So not, assuming all of that goes well, that whole process works not before 2019.
Correct.
Thank you.
And regarding the fish cleaning station, I'll just throw it out there. At some point when we start getting our architect serious about looking at options for the fish cleaning station, I'd intend to do a fair amount of outreach to the users and to the public, because I want to, get folks that use it and get their input on it and see what, I've got my ideas of what we need to do in terms of making it more bird-proof and protecting humans from the birds and the weather and everything else, but the users out there are always going to be the best opinion of what might work and what might not work. So we'll be doing some sort of outreach on that. And maybe the Harbor Advisory Board meeting might be a good forum for it. Have an agenda item all by itself and let people know and have some preliminary designs and take people's input on it, because I want to make it a user-friendly thing and not some kooky design that an engineer comes up with. It looks good on paper, but just doesn't function.
We would welcome that. Gene, do you have something on your mind?
Oh, I'm just going to make a comment that there will probably be some eelgrass issues on the boat launch area that may slow things down. So.
Yeah, there is eelgrass there.
Okay. And
some of the healthy eelgrass.
And on the status of pending HAB recommendations list, the first item, I understand, or I think we understand, the board understands the second sentence about the start over. Is there some action that needs to be taken, some movement that needs to happen? Because this has been on here since May of a long time ago.
My last outreach with Parks, as I said, they were either retired or positions had turned over, and nobody really knew anything about it other than, it's a contract that's been out there on holdover for 20 years. It's just a matter of us, the city of Morro Bay, getting back to state parks and reinitiating, or Parks coming to us if they are so motivated to get something going again. But no, we've just not gotten back to Parks to see where they want to go with it.
Bill?
On that agenda item, as you all know, I've talked to you many times about this. Is this an opportunity to negotiate with Associated Pacific to take over the slips, so that the city can actually manage the slips and manage the docks as we're negotiating, and because it might be another couple of years. It should be, as you well know, revenue-wise, an extra couple $100,000.
Yeah, once we do re-engage Parks, that it is my intent that gets put out there on the table.
Well, there's and there's an associated point with that, which has to do with dredging of the State Parks Marina. You have reported to us and to the public the current status of that. Do you see any future opportunities for that to take place in the near term? And I'll define the near term as 2 years.
It mainly comes down to funding. As we were working up to the current Corps' dredging contract and process, we looked at the possibility of piggybacking on, using the opportunity of having a contractor here, mobilized and paid for by the Corps, to see if there is an opportunity to relook at the dredging and see if we can take advantage of that and save some money. Once Anchor QEA, our consultant, did have a fairly creative way of re-looking at the dredge material to try and combine it for regulatory approval. As I recall, we were still up against a pretty significant bioassay testing regimen that they've been talking to EPA about what EPA would accept in terms of the testing to see the material is acceptable for disposal in the nearshore. The main problem with it was the timeline on getting the bioassay testing done in the Corps project, but more so our our project really hinged upon our assertion that we're doing dredging is occurring in Morro Bay, and a couple 100,000 cubic yards of sand are going to be removed from the bay and put in the nearshore placement site. At the same time, we'll take some less than sandy material and put it in the same placement site and combine the two together, and it actually meets the 70-30 current compatibility standard under those auspices, but EPA wasn't willing to buy off on that. They said, no, you've got to treat them as separate projects. You've got the core with sand, and you guys have got silt and mud, and no, we're not going to let you combine the two. Functionally, even though they're being combined in the water out there, you got to treat them separately, and they wouldn't approve that without the crazy bioassay testing that would just take a long time, a lot of money to do.
So no time soon.
Yeah, that's a long answer.
No, thank you. That's perfect. That was perfect, so, but no time soon.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one of our pending items has to do with the city to use a consultant to update the cost allocation plan, at least as it relates to the department. If feasible, if not, then direct staff to do an internal check. And then, as you noted, back in June, the council approved that as an objective work plan item. And what is the status of the harbor department performing its gut check?
I've had some interesting conversations with our interim finance director and the interim city manager in terms of an all new cost allocation study being done, and general acknowledgement that we need to look at the possibility of doing that in the not too distant future. So we'll see what happens with the new city manager and the new finance director when they come on board, hopefully over the next 2 to 4 months. Status of internal gut check is not conducted yet. I've done some more internal analysis just in terms of the cost allocation itself, and trying to identify areas that look like they could use some attention and that where I could make sense of to focus in on. But my intent is I need to get together with the committee, and that's going to be my starting point, is sitting down with the committee for a few hours and really looking at it hard and identifying what we need to identify, and then getting I'd like to get with probably the final permanent city manager and city finance director, because if we have some sort of findings or conclusion, I don't call it a waste of time, but it may not be the most productive to present that to the two interims, knowing that you've got a couple of permanents coming on that may go in that direction or go in a different direction, who knows. So probably best to wait until they're in the seat to present whatever we find.
Understanding what you just said about timing, do you think that that just cost you $1, Gene? Do you think that's it's okay, Gene? Do you think that the department would be ready to work with the committee in October relative to starting the sort of gut check process?
Yeah.
Okay. That'd be good. And I understand. I'll speak for the board. Totally understand your point about whatever the findings might be of that. Waiting until there's.
So the council, in terms of the city manager, the flyer is just ready to go out for the finance director, city manager. Council's reviewing applications next week in closed session, and so that should be occurring. I think sometime either end of October or early November to get a new city manager on board. So that'll be happening pretty quickly, and then finance director won't be falling too far behind that. The idea being, new city manager has a part in selecting his finance director. So that should be coming along pretty quick. So yeah, October would be not bad timing for that.
Okay, good, thank you. And city to share TOT sales tax and possessory interest revenue that is collected in the harbor fund and used for harbor capital maintenance and improvement. What is the current definition, please, of pending?
You're still in the status report stuff?
I am still in the status report.
Which one is that? I need to.
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up from the bottom.
That's pending. I think that too is pending. That's going to take, obviously, input from a finance director and potentially city manager, so it wouldn't make any sense to do anything with that until we get a new city manager in place, and finance director in place.
Okay, could we add that to the note?
Yeah.
That'd be great, thanks.
And I think that, I mean, that probably could be combined pretty easily with the ad hoc committee and reviewing the cost allocation as well.
Okay, and if you have any current information for us on the last item, which is paid parking, be established on and around tests in the Embarcadero and recommended list of issues to be addressed when considering. As you note, on July 18th, the Harbor Advisory Board sent a letter to the Planning Commission and copied to City Council, Public Works Advisory Board, and the Community Director, the Community Development Director with our recommendations following our consideration of that matter. I at least have had no feedback from the city. Have you had any feedback from the city?
Negative.
What would you suggest?
I suggest either one or both of us can contact the Community Development Director and see if there is anything to update with.
Okay, and given that we copied the City Council, Matt, is it all right if I bring that up with you as our liaison? Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry to echo somewhat of what Eric said. In terms of looking at that issue, in terms of paid parking on the Embarcadero, I think when we talk about our downtown plan and our Embarcadero plan, parking plan, I think that nothing is in concrete right now. It's still very much kind of floating out there. So I kind of have to echo what Eric's saying is like, it's still in the works, the possibility of talking about that.
Okay.
And I say, and I'm sorry to be so obtuse about it, because there is no definite answer I can give you right now. Know that it hasn't necessarily been talked about, and it has not been either accepted and or dismissed, but neither has, and those other ones being that as they're in the stages also of growing. So I'm sorry to be kind of open-ended about that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. The council was, in this particular case, we copied it as an advisory item for council. Speaking for the board, we would really appreciate in the future if when we if we do the work and we send something out to the Planning Commission or the Public Works Advisory Board or the Community Development Director or whoever it is, that we get some response. That would really be appreciated.
And with that said, Ron, I think one thing that I will definitely work on in this next week, I will definitely get a response for you. And if that response is as obtuse and open-ended as I am, it will still be a response. Okay?
Well, that's very kind of you. In this particular case, I don't see that. And I'll speak for the board. We don't see that as the responsibility of the city council, but we certainly appreciate your assistance.
No, definitely, because, and I believe me, having been on the advisory board side of things, I totally get what you're saying. And even if this is still in its nascent stages, I still think the response will be, at least you'll know that it's in the process. You won't have to ask Eric or myself.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Director, thank you. Anything else for staff? No? Okay. So that brings us to agenda item C3, which the board agreed we would move up to the beginning, which is an update from the Eelgrass Ad Hoc Committee. Chairman Meisen?
The last discussion of this was in June, and at that time we made the ad hoc committee made a recommendation. The board approved the recommendation that we sent to City Council. We made a motion, and the recommendation was that the eelgrass mitigation policy be included in the local coastal plan and the general plan. And we added to that we had some questions as to what kind of follow-through the city council would want the committee to pursue in the meantime. Since then, we have been sort of waiting for an answer to that question. And actually, until I got this agenda, I was unaware that Anchor QEA had submitted the proposal. So the committee met briefly a couple of weeks ago just to remind ourselves where we were, what we were doing, if anybody had any ideas on things that we ought to pursue in the meantime. And at that time, we concluded that I would go talk to Eric and just see what the status was for the recommendation to the city council. So I guess that leaves it to our harbor director to talk about the scope of work, the answer proposal from QEA.
Before we get into that, Lynn, do you, is there something that you would like Ann to contribute? Because she was kind enough to stay in anticipation of this agenda item.
Well, I did have a question, but I was going to, for her, and it is regarding the scope of work that we got from QEA.
Oh, I guess we'd let Eric go first.
So that's why I would
Sure.
ask Eric to go
Sure,
first.
okay.
So in terms of the Harbor Advisory Board's two recommendations, I thought it best to wait to see what we get from Anchor, to see where they may be guiding us from a policy standpoint, because obviously there's the language part that we're recommending, but then there's also here's a policy outline, what do you think? I think it's best if we were to wait to get our input from Anchor and see where they would recommend going and see where they would potentially take us as a consultant before we went to any further to council with it. So actually, when I was writing this agenda last week, I was getting ready to contact Anchor QEA to see where they're at, because I hadn't seen anything. They sent me their proposal, so I'd just gotten this. I think, Lynn, when you came to my office, I hadn't seen it yet. And 20 minutes later, it popped in after you left my office. So it kind of made it obvious that now that we've got this, we can move it forward a little bit more. So I wanted to bring the proposal to the Harbor Advisory Board tonight, include Ann and the NEP if she's got any input, and bat it around with the Harbor Advisory Board. Basically get endorsement of Anchor's proposal, or if there's any recommended changes to it. It's basically, the City Council approved in my budget up to $5,000 for consultancy on this, so it's not a lot of money, but it's enough to kind of get off the ground with Anchor, and for them to come and, as you can see from their proposal, they're recommending that they come in and do a presentation to the Harbor Advisory Board, review available information about eelgrass populations and dynamics. Obviously, they'd be talking a lot with the National Estuary Program, talk with city staff, both here and community development, to see what the project issues are in terms of our waterfront leaseholders and the issues they've had, and how things might get addressed in that regard. Then they'll prepare a presentation to the Harbor Advisory Board, also in light of the California Eelgrass Mitigation Program and their experience in Newport Beach and helping develop their eelgrass plan, and discuss lessons learned, and hopefully provide us some guidance on where we might be able to move forward on this from a policy standpoint, both in probably the general plan, local coastal plan, and in policy development. So now that we finally got a proposal from Anchor, what I'd be looking for is input tonight from you folks on that proposal as a valid way to work forward, including the outline that we already have from the ad hoc committee on a potential path forward, and then take that to Anchor and engage them and continue on and move forward with it.
Okay, under this proposal from Anchor, if I may read the scope of work that they proposed here, which you have, well, I guess you did pretty much read it, but just to make the bullet points: review available information about eelgrass in Morro Bay. Would that information not come from for the most part, or in large part, from the NEP. And this is where Anne might be able to step up and help us out on this. Or I'd like to hear her comments on these points. And if I can finish first, Anne. One is the review of information about eelgrass. 2 is to discuss typical projects that may impact eelgrass. 3, basic elements of the camp. 4, details of Newport Beach, and that is probably where Anchor has the vast amount of information already since they worked on that. And the lessons learned from the policy that was developed in Newport Beach. And I would wonder if, since NEP has so much information about the population and has worked with Cal Poly and others, if running that through QEA and then over to us is kind of a roundabout way to get that information, or maybe there is something I'm missing here. Anne, what do you think?
So you're asking if the NEP would work directly with QEA on exchanging data?
QEA is intending to talk to the committee, as I understand it, and talk to NEP to gather information on these various topics. So Lexi has been on this committee and has worked with us and helped develop the plan that we submitted in June. So if you're talking about eelgrass population dynamics, then probably the NEP is in part the expert there, having their contacts with Cal Poly and the researchers. So getting information from QEA, getting information from the NEP to go to QEA to then be filtered through and come back to the board seems to me to be roundabout. That kind of information I would see could come to us directly from the NEP and Cal Poly, rather than paying the QEA to get that information, process it, and rewrite it. Am I making myself clear on that?
Well, I would say that we're happy to share the data with whomever is interested in it. So there's detailed monitoring data looking at, specific beds over a certain time period. There's also maps showing bay-wide extent over time and how that's changed. I'm assuming that's primarily what they're interested in. And so that information, GIS files, we'd be happy to share either directly with you or work with QEA, or both,
And I don't think QEA's intent would be QEA is going to go to NEP, get the information, and then just give it to us. Okay, we got the information. I think they want to look at it, analyze it, see how it, just get an understanding of the dynamics and what's going on in Morro Bay and what our issues are and how those issues might affect our particular projects, and then hold that up against their experience with Newport Beach and what they've done there, and see what sort of data and what sort of process may be applicable to Morro Bay to help us move forward. So I don't know that you'd be saving a step or saving Anchor's money by having the NEP give us data, because we know the data's there. It's just how QEA would take it and analyze it in terms of them looking through their lens to figure out how they think we should move forward with policy and mitigation development.
Okay. I said there might be.
And it sounds like the NEP is more than willing to share whatever they've got, however they can.
Yes, of course they will. They always have.
Excuse me, did you contact QEA? Did you contact Anchor?
No, I didn't.
You did not. So you contacted Anchor?
Yeah, when this became when it got into it's been on this year's goals and last year's goals, but when I got a budget for it, is when I contacted Anchor and said, hey, I'm looking for a little bit of start out consultancy help here. Here's what our problem is. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's our ad hoc committee and what we've done. This is the issue. And Anchor's, I've dealt with them on several projects we've done over the years, and I speak to the principal that I deal with pretty regular, and we just chat about general stuff pretty regular. So he's got an idea of what we're up against, and some of the projects that we've had troubles with. In terms of eelgrass and permitting, they're good enough to, I can call and, pick their brain, and they'll give me information or suggestions on how to proceed. So they've got a kind of idea what we're up against and what we're trying to do. So I contacted Anchor and just said, hey, give me a proposal on, here's what we're trying to do, here's our issues, here's our hopes and dreams and desires. Give me a proposal on what you'd move forward with to help us start down this path of potentially developing our own policies and mitigation programs specific to Morro Bay. So that's where it came from. It just took them about 2.5 months to get it to me.
Lynn and the board, I'm sensitive to Ann being so generous with her time this evening. Is there something that we want from Ann, or we could benefit from Ann, or before we thank her for for her time? Gene?
Yes, Ann, thanks for being here and sticking with us. Are you aware in your data, do you have the information from Tenera, who's done the eelgrass studies on the northern part of the bay?
We received that information through the city.
Okay, that's vital, because some of those eelgrass beds have grown 600%. So, okay.
Neil?
Somewhat to that point, is there, and what Lynn was asking, is there more data that exists that QEA could unearth that the NEP doesn't already have access to, do you think? I know
Relative to Morro Bay.
Yeah, and we're not in a court right now, so it's just...
So you're asking about data, Morro Bay specific data
Yeah.
that we aren't aware of.
Yeah.
I guess I doubt it, but
Okay.
I guess it's possible, yes. I mean, and then
But
I
for
don't
the
know
most
how
part, you
far
have
back.
the data.
Yes.
Funnels back to you.
Just a second. Does NEP subcontract to consulting entities?
No, I don't think we have in the past. It doesn't mean we can't. What are you scheming?
Your data is valuable. I don't believe in free lunch.
Well, I would say that we want to see a policy that's protective of eelgrass, but that also allows thoughtful development to occur. We want the work to occur in line with the Kemp.
Is that by way of saying that NEP is sufficiently motivated to participate
I would say we are sufficiently motivated to participate, yes.
for free?
Well, you're talking about data that we've already collected and we're happy to share. I'm assuming
Yeah, but
the
they
time
cost.
spent to do that, to coordinate with Anchor would really be fairly minimal. So I guess it depends what Anchor has in mind.
That's a good response. I like that part. Good, thank you. Neil?
I have two more questions that staff, anybody, and you can also answer. Is there any other company that does this same function as QEA? And that's one question. The second would be, has staff or this committee spoken with anybody that has worked with QEA to see what their experience has been going through a similar process, such as the Newport Harbor?
I would assume there's probably several other companies that do this general kind of consultancy. QEA is one we've worked with on multiple projects, and I've got a good comfort level with, number one. And number two, they were involved in the Newport project. And I have spoken to Chris Miller down there at the Newport Beaches and Harbors Department, and he was pretty instrumental in that whole process, and they spoke highly of Anchor and their participation in what they did. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Bill, you had something?
I guess the one point that, what are we going to get for $5,000?
Well, hang on, I'll come right back to you. I'm still sensitive to Ann.
Okay, so I guess the one question, Ann, since you're here,
Yes.
would you put a proposal in to do a $5,000 study for eelgrass for Morro Bay?
Well, just a second. That's not what we're after here. That's not what we're after. And what this proposal needs to address is the development of an eelgrass management plan for Morro Bay. That's the point. So, if you want to restate your question, Bill, in that context.
No, that's okay. I'm just curious.
Well, no, it's a legitimate question.
Well, I mean, Yeah, I mean, we have NEP right here in our front door, and are they able to prepare a management policy for the city of Morro Bay? And are we, the harbor, able to contract out to you? Would you be interested?
So I'm speaking for Lexi, but I would imagine that this is not our area of expertise. You know, we try to be the nexus for the monitoring and the research data, and we've been involved in all the restoration efforts. But management of eelgrass is a completely different thing outside of our area of expertise. So I would imagine the answer is no, that's not something that the estuary program would undertake.
Okay, anything else for Ann? Ann, thank you so much.
Certainly.
Thank you. That's an hour and a half out of your life. Thank you
That's
very,
all
very
right.
much.
Of course, call on us if you think of other questions or, you know, want to coordinate the sharing of data.
Okay, now
Thank
you mentioned the current report. How can the public access that report?
Oh, so from on our website, so if you just Google Morro Bay National Estuary Program, it's called the State of the Bay Report, and the full report is available online, or you can stop by our office and grab a copy if you're a more tactile person and want to have one you can hold in your hand. I have a stack of copies here for all of you, so I'll just leave them.
Thank you.
Okay?
Good. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you so much. All right, so as it relates to the essence of this agenda item, which focuses on a proposal from Anchor QEA to work with the city to develop an eelgrass management plan, or policy, I guess it's policy, Lynn, as opposed to plan?
It's mitigation policy.
Okay, mitigation policy. So that's the question, that's the issue in front of us. If there's no more general questions, then I'd like the board to comment as it will on this proposal, because that's what the director asked us to do. Gene, your thoughts on this proposal?
I'd say move ahead with it at this point. I just want to make sure that they have the data from the Tenera, because that to me is very important. So.
Okay, thank you. Pete?
I would say move ahead with it as well.
Okay, Lynn, I'm going to skip over you just for the moment. Okay. Bill?
I would concur with Gene, who was on this committee, to move forward with the proposal, if it makes sense. So I would concur to do it.
Dana?
Yeah, I would agree also.
Okay, Neil?
I agree with moving forward. I think this is critical to have a third-party weigh in here. So I agree.
Okay, Lynn, what's your thinking about this, and then I'll go last.
I still have a question on the scope of work that I would like to have I would like to get my committee together and talk about it first. And I know it's this meeting and it's another month before there's another meeting, and I wouldn't know. I would like to be able to have a meeting with my committee and discuss it and then immediately come back here, but I don't know that that would be in any way possible in order to get their thoughts on it as well.
Well, there isn't an established deadline. On the other hand, we struggle constantly to move things along.
Yes, we do, and that's my conundrum. I want to move it along, but I would sure like to talk to them first. So that's my decision, isn't it? I guess we go forward.
No,
with
it's the
this.
board's decision.
It's the board, no.
But you're making a recommendation to us.
My recommendation, what my thoughts are.
Okay.
I would like to have that, but since I cannot have what I want, I guess we have to go along with the best thing, and that is to go ahead with the proposal from QEA.
Well,
Perhaps not.
Yeah, another way to look at it.
Perhaps not. So, the only two places in this proposal where I see the mission defined is in paragraph 2 and in paragraph 3, where there's a reference to California eelgrass mitigation policy and implementing guidelines, and in paragraph 3, the eelgrass protection and mitigation plan for shallow waters in lower Newport Bay. That is the mission, as I understand it, is the development, and it's not the responsibility of Anchor QEA, it's what we have been tasked by the council to pursue, which is the development of a Morro Bay eelgrass mitigation policy that would allow the city to, that would help the city, not allow it, which would help the city in its development decisions and development policies. So what I don't see in here, and I'm speaking as a consultant, a professional consultant, what I don't see in here in the proposed scope of work is a reference to the development of a Morro Bay eelgrass mitigation policy. I also think that, as Lynn previously commented, out of the 4 elements that are in the paragraph for proposed scope of work, unless Anchor QEA has some proprietary information relative to Morro Bay's eelgrass situation, they're not the ones who are going to develop it. I appreciate that they would need to review it if they were going to participate in helping the city develop a policy, so the review is probably appropriate. The most important thing that I see in here is the last element, which is a, quote, brief discussion of lessons learned from the process, unquote, as it relates to Newport. I mean, that, to me, is the most valuable piece of information. So what I would like to see, just speaking as one member of the board, I would like to see in this proposed scope of work a critical path, a proposed critical path for the development of an eelgrass mitigation policy. That doesn't mean that the proposal for $5,000 needs to address the entire process, but it certainly ought to identify, first of all, I'm going to rely upon the consultant to tell me this is how it has to go. This is the critical path. These are the elements. These are all the elements, because we've already done this. We, Anchor QEA, we've already done this, and we know, and here's the sequence of these things, and for $5,000, you get the first 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever it is. So that's what I'd like to see. It's a little too open-ended. I'd love to get a contract like this, because no one's going to be looking over my shoulder asking me what I'm doing. So, yeah, I mean, I appreciate, and I appreciate the director's comments about his familiarity with Anchor QEA and the good report that he got from Newport. I mean, that's very important information, and I'm not diminishing it in any way, and I'm not picking on Anchor QEA. I just would like to see some more definition here.
So I'm going to have you back up to the first page, last paragraph, which to me speaks to the scope element that you're talking about.
Last paragraph?
Yeah, for last
first page?
First page, last paragraph. Has given us work in the Newport Beach eelgrass plan and mini eelgrass mitigation restoration project has given us the experience necessary to provide insight to the city about potential approaches to eelgrass management in Morro Bay. That, for this initial kickoff direction that we're asking Anchor QEA for, it seems to me that is more scope of worky than what's up in the actual scope of work. That is what we're looking for is potential approaches to eelgrass management. And part of that could include, hey, here's a critical path. Here's a critical path to getting there. Here's potential approaches to your policy and plan, what you're trying to do, and here's a critical path to get there. That sentence really ought to be in the scope of work. I think that speaks to one of the things you're asking for, something a little more definite. Because, I don't know what the critical path is going to be. I don't know what recommended approaches are going to be to policy development for Morro Bay
Well, I'm not
specific.
interested, I'm not addressing specifics. I'm interested in process, and if the consultant is qualified to do the work, then I at least am, sitting here on the Harbor Advisory Board, are going to be looking to the consultant to tell me what that process is, what the recommended process is. So what I would suggest that meets Lynn's needs, perhaps, I'm not, I mean, it's up to the board, and I'm going to ask for a vote here in just a couple of minutes when we're done talking about this. But I'm not in a position right now to approve this, and I'd like to see it readdressed. I'd like to see the proposal fine-tuned a little bit. That's my commentary. So, do I hear a motion relative to this proposal? Anything's okay. We can approve it as it is if that's what the majority wants to do.
Well, for discussion, I think Lynn raised some valid points, and so did you. We just received this proposal, and I haven't had a chance to really review it, and you brought out some great points. So I'd say we table it for another month.
I'll second that. I concur to that.
So is there, so Lynn and Eric, is there a downside to going through another, for the committee to request enough, for Eric to request a refined proposal for the committee to look at that and for it to come back to us in October? Is there a downside on that?
The only downside I see is that we're not
moving it.
We're not moving.
You're moving. You're getting clarity.
Well, it was last June that we submitted our recommendation to City Council. That was
Things take time.
You know, a possible approach to this might be we've got the concerns on the table, I think, although we could maybe drill down on Lynn's a little bit more. Lynn, I don't think you ever quite went there. You said you want to talk to your committee about it. We could discuss what the concerns are. Ron, I've got yours. We could certainly empower the committee with working with me to get back to Anchor to say, hey, we want you to revise this in A, B, and C way, and empower the committee to do that.
I completely concur with that.
Then we don't have to swing back to the Harbor Advisory Board again.
Just myself, and I would entertain a motion that would that would empower the committee to do that. But one more comment. The only other thing that I would like to see, and this is not because it's Anchor QEA, it's because I think that every consultancy proposal should include this. Who's going to do what? Which of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 actually, different billing rates is going to do what? So I would like to see, we're going to do this, it's going to take, fill in the blank, 6 hours, and it's 2 hours of principal time, and it's 2 hours of staff 2 time, and I don't care what the answer is, I just would like to see the data. That's all.
Question is, Anchor, since they're in Mission Viejo, did they have a local person that lives here? Because, for $5,000, if they're going to stay here, that's, travel time, hotel time. I mean, I'm just curious.
No, the primary person I deal with is in Ventura.
Okay.
Got an office in Ventura. That's where he operates out of.
And in the summary teleconference was the first meeting.
Okay, so is there a motion to empower the Harbor Advisory Board's Eelgrass Committee to move forward with this and to work with the department to recommend an approved proposal?
Can the ad hoc committee make that motion, or does it have to be another member from the other board?
Could be anybody.
Well, Gene's concerned about conflict, I think so.
Yeah.
Can I say so moved?
Sure.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Somebody who's not.
I'll second it.
Okay. And I don't see a reason why you folks can't vote on this. Eric, do you see any reason why the committee members can't vote on this motion?
No, just because you're a committee member doesn't preclude you from voting.
Sure, well, we're getting a little sensitive here. So is the motion clear? We're going to empower the committee? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Carries. Thank you. Eric, did you get what you needed on this?
Yes.
And then some.
And then some.
Okay, so that brings us to C1, which is an update from the Marine Services Facility Boatyard Ad Hoc Committee. Dana?
Thank you. The ad hoc committee are looking forward to progress on boat storage. It's part of a work plan element. It's revenue generating for the city, and we're hoping to see that storage area develop more. Another thing happened is I was notified by the harbor director about a grant funding possibility. It was the NOAA Fisheries Saltonstall Kennedy grant through the NOAA Fisheries. This is a research and development program. It's for sustainability of fishermen communities, fishing communities, and I met with a couple of our ad hoc members, Lexi Bell, along with Pandora Nash Carner, who are both experienced in grant writing, and talked to them about it. Looking over previous winners of these grants and the outline of it, it is a lot of research is what they're looking for. So hard, physical, facility building money for that, not so much, not really at all that I saw in the previous ones. So we were trying to come up with good ideas for what might fit, and the ideas of design might be possible in this application, as far as a water reclamated washdown area that would be possible for a future boat yard and the boats in a storage yard. That was kind of our best idea. Also, the applicant would be most suited would be the Morro Bay Commercial Fishermen's Organization to submit an application for this funding. There is a pre-app that precedes the real big application. This is a $300,000 cap funding. So I also talked to Tom Hafer of the Morro Bay Commercial Fishermen's Organization, and he brought up controlling invasive species as another topic to put in possibly into the application. So that's kind of where we're at, right? That's what I've done so far, and it's kind of a long shot, to tell you the truth.
What's the submission deadline, please?
That would be October 10th for the pre-app, which is, I think that's still doable. I wanted to talk to Jeremiah. Of course, he's not here right now. A little hard to get a hold of him. So that's where we're at right now.
Okay. Questions, comments from the board? For Dana?
What is the amount of the grant, Dana?
These are caps of $300,000.
Anybody else? Okay. All right. Thank you, Dana. C2, update from the Finance and Budget Ad Hoc Committee. Neil?
Yeah, thank you. We have not had a meeting since for the last 2 months. But as we went over earlier tonight, Eric, we discussed meeting in October to go over the allocation plan and the city's sharing of the TOT sales tax and possessory interest revenue in October. And I think that regardless of whether we have permanent staff or temporary staff, we might not get decisions made, but I think as far as information gathering, it might be beneficial regardless of who's sitting in the chair, permanent or temporary. So I would stress the importance of having this meeting in October, and would like to put something on the calendar for the committee to meet with as much staff as possible to go over both of these topics.
Yeah, put together some, maybe some couple of dates you think work
Okay,
for the committee, and I'll look at my schedule and go from there.
great. That's all that I have. If you have something to contribute to that comment.
No, I was just wondering, from Eric's perspective, which is the most expedient for the committee to poll itself and suggest some dates to you, or for you to tell us your available dates?
Start with poll the committee. We'll see where it goes.
Okay.
And if you don't contact me, Lori's got my schedule. You can always ask her and see if you've got some tentatives. You can always ask, or shoot me an email. Hey, we're thinking of October 12th or whatever.
Okay, and I would say
You come up with the dates.
there's 3 of us too, and if we can't all be there, then, we
That's-
we're a little more flexible possibly than
Yeah.
having the,
I don't want to try and herd you guys. You can try and herd me.
okay, we'll get some dates to you.
We'll rely on Lori to herd you. So.
And that's it for the ad hoc committee.
Okay, good, thanks. So that brings us to C4, which is an update from the Marine Sanctuary Ad Hoc Committee. There is no new activity there and nothing to report. C5, update from the Working Waterfront Ad Hoc Committee. Gene?
We have a meeting tomorrow and with the Planning Commission ad hoc committees, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Just one thing on that. The national organization has just put out a survey. If there's anything, if you go to their site, you can,
Which national organization, please?
Working Waterfront. They have a survey that you can do asking what you would like to see more on from their organization. So I would say anybody and everybody should take a look at that. It's on the Harbor Advisory Board. Add their comments.
Thank you, Dana. C6, Harbor Advisory Board work, I'm not, by the way, and Eric hasn't had to remind me, I'm not asking for public comment on these items because the only person in the audience is our council liaison. And if he wanted to talk, he would for sure let us know that he wanted to talk. So, C6, Harbor Advisory Board Work Program for City Council Goals and Objectives. C6.
Thank you, and I'm going to go backwards a little bit, back to status report on the discussion on parking recommendation. We had our weekly council agenda setting meeting with department heads today, and I had a brain cell reminding myself that something was on the tentative agenda in the future for parking, and Lori just looked it up. October 10th on the tentative agenda is discussion and direction on implementation of portions of the 2007 parking management plan. Whether our recommendations from the HAB are playing into that is yet to be seen, but it's coming to the council, parts of it at least soon. I don't know what parts exactly what portions they're looking at doing, but it's potential we may see our data looked at there. So I just wanted to add that before I forgot and before Matt took off, so he hears it as well. Okay, on to C6. As you know, Ron, we've been working through goal objective stuff over the last couple of meetings you and I have had on agenda setting, and at the last Harbor Advisory Board meeting, we put some things in terms of, quarter 1, quarter 2, what we want to see, and we came to some conclusions on what we wanted to see at the last HAB meeting. At this HAB meeting, and I believe we've got 5 things to look at. So what I'm hoping for out of each of these is, we may make some motions and recommendations. I've done some general, a little bit of analysis on there, on some of them, some more than others, and then some issues to consider. What I really want to discuss with the HAB is, what are the issues and what direction or what sort of input would you have on the issues in order to try and carry these items forward. So I won't go over the whole council setting goal agenda of work program process, but as you know, we've got several goals and objectives and work plans to implement. So the first one we'll look at is Goal 1D, work plan element, which is WPE 6, fee-based boat and/or RV parking in the portion of the Triangle parking lot. I don't think there's any question amongst the Harbor Advisory Board whether we support that, because I know we've talked about moving that forward as a goal item. That's why we're looking at it. But I did a little basic research and plotted a few things out in the Triangle parking lot. If you take the sort of northwestern or northeastern, corner of the lot, or most of the eastern part of the lot, you can get about 55 10 by 30 parking spaces, which are about a trailer, standard trailer boat size parking space. Could fit into that back northeast corner of the lot with a one entry on one end, pull through, you can back your trailer into your space, unhook, drive away, or the opposite, hook up and drive out, and then pull through out of another entry gate at the other end. So you get about 55 spaces. It would take about 1/3 of the lot footprint, more or less. We've got a current harbor master fee rate that is $3.05 a day for what we rent out at our storage yard out by where the baiters work and where our storage yard is. It's about a 9 by 20 space, kind of what we call a standard car parking space. So we rent those out at $3.05 a day, which is about $90 a month, $91 a month. So that's what we've got as an existing master fee rate. Other storage yards for parking your boat out there in the $65 to $85 range for a 30-foot space. Once you start going bigger, that space can be for an RV boat. That's just general size limitations they have. Once you go above 30 feet, it starts to get a little more expensive. Putting in fencing, obviously we'd have to fence it and think about other basic infrastructure, but fencing and maybe a little concertina wire and gates and whatnot costs somewhere between $10,000 and $12,000 to install. So that's kind of the overrun of what you could potentially put back in that lot without having too much impact on the whole lot. Obviously, you want to take more lot, you could get more spaces in there. Usage patterns haven't been real huge, as you know, except during some events that direct people into there, but otherwise it's a fairly unused piece of parking lot, except for the Maritime Museum submarine equipment and trailer that are out there. So that's kind of the basics of what you could sort of fit in there, 55 spaces. Don't know what the demand would be. Issues to consider on it are we wouldn't want to establish rates that unfairly compete with the private sector. In other words, we wouldn't want our rates to be a lot lower than the private sector, because that's just not fair competition with the private folks. Security considerations and infrastructure. Chain link fence is not immune to break-in and possible people stealing equipment or taking stuff off boats. So what sort of security considerations or any other infrastructure we want to look at? Cameras, lighting is a security consideration as well. How do we manage it? First come, first serve, or do we establish a waiting list? Do we just put the word out and say, until this thing's full, come on and establish a waiting list? So how do we manage it? And then again on management, do we as a city manage it, or do we just turn it over to somebody to privately manage it under a license agreement of some sort, and the city just gets a take of the proceeds, and a company of some sort or a person manages it and takes care of all the security and all the headaches themselves? Destination of the revenues, it's not on the Tidelands side of the Embarcadero. It's outside the Tidelands Trust, but I would make the case that if we're putting this together and we're managing it, by gosh, we better get a majority of the proceeds. But the general fund may have something to say about that. So where do the revenues go? It's not Tidelands Trust property. It's general fund property that acquired it, city property that acquired it. So that's a consideration to be thought of. what do we store? Boats, RVs, or boats as a priority and only RVs as space available, or only boats? Since we're looking at making this a boatyard ancillary project, should it be only boats, or should we do a combination, or whoever shows up first is whoever gets it first? And would you want to do any sort of priority to Morro Bay residents? If it's a waiting list or a first come, first served basis, another consideration. And then anything else out there hanging that you might think of. So that's kind of my bit on paid parking in the lot. As far as generation of revenues would go,
Got it for you.
pull out my handy dandy
60,000 a
ciphering
year.
machine. What do you got? You've already done it?
Using the $85 a month figure,
90.
using the $85 a month figure as the high end of what you said other local storage yards charge, that's $4,675 gross per month if all 55 spaces are occupied.
So it sounds like it's about $50,000 a year. Yeah.
Are we going to comment on this item as we move through?
Well, we're waiting to see if the director's finished presenting it to us.
So that's kind of the basics of it. As I said, we put it as a goal objective for a reason. I think there's interest in pursuing it. That's the basic analysis of it. My intent to carry this forward, the goal item for the council is bring to council for consideration fee-based boat and or RV parking in a portion and triangle lot. So this is part of the analysis part, and I want to get your input on these different elements and anything else you might have to bring to bear.
Okay, thanks. And thanks for the suggested issues. And the last one is other, so it's wide open. So I would suggest as a format that we work our way down through, this is a fine list, the A through H is fine, and we can get to other when we're done. I would suggest that we quickly comment as you choose, as the board chooses, on each of these items. And if that's okay with the board, then we'll start with A, and we'll start down on Bill's end. Rates that don't unfairly compete with the private sector. Bill, you're thinking about that?
I don't see why we shouldn't be charging more money. We're right there on the Embarcadero. The access to hopefully is going to be, a little better. I mean, if we charged $100, $150, I don't see any reason why not. So, I mean, especially if we don't limit it to just Morro Bay. I mean, people in the San Joaquin Valley feels they have a safe place to store their boats when they do come over here. I think this would be something that would be a premier storage place. That's my feelings on that.
Dana?
Yeah, location is far superior. You have the capability of having mass up. You can't do that anywhere else in Morro Bay. If you have, even fishing boats with poles up, they couldn't really go down the Embarcadero if they wanted to launch down there with power lines and stuff. You could go down the Embarcadero from here, but you can't from up the street. So I think those two things right there would be really good reasons to have a much higher rate than everybody else, and then you're not competing against them because you're not the same.
Neil?
I would agree with that. It's premium location, and it's a lot easier to lower your prices than raise them. So if you aren't getting interest because your price might be too high, you can keep information from people who inquire, and once you discount the price, if the demand's not there, then maybe you'll get people circling back, but it'll be a lot harder to raise the prices once you realize how popular it is. And so that's what I would say as far as A.
Lynn?
Yes, I would, number one, wonder what they're getting down at Port San Luis for their RV parking down there. I would also suggest that security considerations, if you look at Port San Luis, they don't have any security down there. You can walk in, walk out, you can drive through.
Let's stick with A for right now.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. We'll come right back to you. Okay. Anything else on A?
Then no.
Okay. Pete, A?
I agree with Neil.
Okay.
I think the rates should be higher.
Okay. Gene?
Same thing, make them a little higher than the private sector.
Okay. And I have a quick question regarding rates. Eric, where were the, quote, other local storage yards, unquote, located? The 65 to 85 a month?
There's
Just generally.
Frank's up on Main by the glass shop, and then that little lot down on Marina.
On
and
Marina.
So local,
something or other.
local meant Morro Bay.
Local, yeah.
Downtown Morro Bay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I agree, it's premium. I mean, what the actual number would be, I don't have an informed decision, but
Yeah, that's good.
absolutely master fee rate, if not more.
Equal or more? I
Yeah,
mean,
equal
more
or
than.
more. Okay.
Yep.
B, security considerations and infrastructure. Gene, your end. Pete.
I'm in the Avila Boatyard right now, and they don't have fencing, but in the time that I've been there, I don't see security as a problem. I don't really think that the fencing and concertina wire is really necessary. A fence keeps an honest man honest. That's my feeling.
Okay, thank you. Lynn?
I would also look at Avila and say they don't have any security. I've been hauled out in their boatyard 4 or 5 times, and it has not, security has not been a problem down there. I would not expect it to be a problem here.
Okay, Gene?
How about lighting? Would that be some kind of concern?
That's number 3.
You just said security.
It's number 3.
Okay.
Okay. Neil, we're trying to blast through this.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I agree. Security-wise, I don't think it's as important. Just one thing with Avila is it's more of an island because it's one street in, one street out. So Morro Bay's got a little bit more dynamic. That's all.
Okay. Dana?
Chain link fence, key fob entry. I think that the difference between Port St. Louis is they have Harbor Patrol cops that are right there. That's where they're headquartered, right next to the boatyard. And it is very lit up, well enough, I mean, for security.
Okay, Bill?
I definitely think we should have chain link fence for the storage.
Go ahead, Neil.
If we are going to tie A to this, if we're going to charge a premium, I think that fencing might also be something that's attractive to people if you put a fence up and say, well, it's secured. So,
And my thinking about security is, remember what's on the east border of this property. Blind brush. Lots of opportunity to sneak through. So, okay. Anything else on security? Okay. Lighting, Gene.
Is lighting a concern as far as uphill, upland residences and things like that?
That's a good, actually, I hadn't even thought about that part. Oh. A quick question, just, I'm not expressing an opinion, jumping to my turn here. I take it lighting was not included in your 10 to 12K estimate for infrastructure?
No, there's power that goes overhead there. I think it's pretty high KV, but yeah, we could probably bring lighting from the sewer lift station in our storage yard adjacent, trench something over, or do something solar, but no, I didn't put lighting in my...
For additional money?
That's really the fencing cost.
Yeah, okay.
Mostly.
All right, lighting. Pete?
The Avila Yard's very well lit, and with people working there at night, liability.
Is that by way of saying that you think lighting's a good
Yes,
idea?
I do. I
Good.
agree with it.
Okay. Lynn?
Lighting would be very important.
Neil?
lighting is very important. Maybe just have directional lighting to avoid light pollution for neighbors.
Dana?
Yeah, lighting is necessary, and I think that for, as far as concern for the upland people, they've been next to a power plant for many years that is pretty well lit, and this would be much lower.
Bill?
Concur with lighting. I think we should have it.
Agree. First come, first served, or a waiting list. Bill?
First come, first serve.
Dana?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Neil?
I agree. First come, first serve, but I think there should be a waiting list if it fills up, and that might trigger a second phase in which we grow. So in case, it ties in a little bit with locals, if it's first come, first serve, and then we fill up all of a sudden, and then you might give priority to locals on phase 2, and maybe think about expanding into 2/3 or some other math of the parking lot.
Lynn?
First come, first serve.
Pete?
First come, first serve.
Gene?
First come, first serve, and then is there a priority, maybe the local people can get a break on the price to get some of the cars off of some of the boats off of the driveways?
Okay. Next, city or private? In other words, who's going to operate it? Concessionaire, city, and what does the city mean? And I have a quick question as a precursor to this. Eric, does the Harbor Department have the resources available to manage this endeavor?
If we were to manage it the way I would intend to manage it, would be, I guess the short answer is yes. We would manage it much the way we do our storage or our on-ramp parking passes. You come in, you pay, you set up your account, you get the code to, and there's another consideration, whether it's security or management, I guess it's a management consideration, access in and out. You give everybody a code. This is where manpower might get a little more intensive. You've got a gate with a combination to get through. You come in, you pay your fee, you register, we get all your information, you get the gate code, you let yourself in, you let yourself out. So there's obviously a potential security issue there unless somebody's there sort of chaperoning you, but I guess Port San Luis is the same way, just go in and out and as you feel free. And then we wouldn't do it like we do our slips where we check to make sure people are there every day. You pay for your month and you get your month. We don't care if you're in there 1 day a month or 30 days a month. You're paying for it and you're using it, and we just bill accordingly. And when people leave, we stop billing and confirm they're gone and rent their space to somebody else. So that's how I'd propose to do it if we did it internally.
Okay, a quick comment on the code thing. Having used dry storage myself, key fob with a deposit, no code. You got to change the code all the time to keep it secure. So key fob, and if I don't turn my key fob in, they hit me hard. $250.
And you can program those key fobs out of usage.
Easily.
Yeah. Yes. 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 But you don't have to go over there unless notify 55 people that you're changing the gate code.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, okay. So management. I forgot where I left off. Bill.
I think the Harbor Department should be managing it.
I looked at Gene and said, Bill. That's how confused I am. Harbor Department should manage it. Dana.
Yeah, this was brought up previously at another meeting, and somebody suggested the yacht club. I thought the Harbor Department could do this, but if maybe this needs to be investigated, I don't know. The yacht club, for long-range planning, has always been looking for another yard than the one that they lease now across the street from the yacht club. Just because it's temporary. We've had it for many years, but it's temporary. And expressing this to a few other staff commodores, there was agreement that this could be beneficial either way. So,
does the yacht club charge that space on a monthly basis?
Yes, it does.
And so it has all of the infrastructure necessary to manage a monthly rental and 55 remote spaces?
Yes, it does, but not at this security level. We're pretty low security because we are right there and take care of it ourselves. And everybody knows each other. So I would say not yet. It could be, but I'm just saying that's an option. It was brought up before, and it's still an option to be looked at.
Okay, Neil?
That's an interesting idea that I hadn't really contemplated, but I would lean towards the city as well, unless, but as a plan B or another option, the yacht club could be an interesting one to take over that too.
Lynn?
I really don't know.
That's okay. Pete?
City.
Gene?
Harbor Department.
Okay, I agree with the Harbor Department, provided that the revenue split is appropriate.
Yes.
Okay, destination of revenues. That's an interesting choice of words. Destination of revenues. Who should get the money? Gene?
Harbor Department.
Harbor Department.
Lynn?
Harbor Department.
Neil?
Harbor Department.
Dana?
Destination of revenues, I think it should go into a fund for facilities, undergrounding the overhead line that runs through the middle of it, or possibly a washing facility. So, but everybody's got to pay, so whatever.
Okay.
Harbor Department.
Okay. And my thinking about that is that whoever's managing it needs to get the vast share of it. It is city property, and I would be astonished if the city didn't want some contribution toward general fund. But I would, given that it might be a negotiation, I would start off where the Harbor Department or the concessionaire with 80-20. And I would try not to blink. Okay, boats and RVs, comma, boat priority and RVs only if space available, comma, or boats only. Bill?
All the above.
Dana?
Boats only.
Neil?
In regards to what I previously said, I would say all of the above, except only if that second phase was allowed, in which case if it filled up real fast with RVs, then if those were the first people who came in, then it would be a shame that no boats got in. So if we knew that there was going to be a second phase that could then maybe prioritize that towards boats if there wasn't a good mix and we weren't serving the needs of a place for boat trailers.
Lynn?
I would tend toward boats only. There are other places where RVs can go, but there are very few waterfront places for boat storage, especially if we ever if the yacht club loses their storage yard.
Pete?
Boats only for the same reason. If the commercial fishermen lose their storage yard for some reason.
Gene?
Definitely boats only.
Yeah, working water, yeah. And my position is if the city is willing to commit to this as a program, then you start with boats, and if you need
See how it
to,
goes.
and if you need to, fill the spaces with something else on a month-to-month basis.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, priority to Morro Bay residents, question mark. Bill?
I don't know on that one.
Okay, Dana?
Yeah, if it's possible.
Neil?
Yes, if possible.
Lynn?
Not necessarily.
Pete?
Again, to the working waterfront, I would want fishermen to have priority. That's how I feel.
That's a good, strong point. Gene?
Yeah, I'd say locals should have a reduced rate and priority.
Okay, my position is no reduced rate for anybody, but locals priority and perhaps fishermen on top of that. Brings us back to Pete's point about a working waterfront. Yeah. Okay, and do we have any other? Neil, have you identified an other?
Yeah, it's in regards to something back up on the top. The rates, maybe possibly using like the day rate, like if Pete, for example, has a spot, but he knows his boat's going to be gone down in Santa Barbara fishing lobster for a month, he could hold his spot while the city sublet out his lease for, a shorter period of time. Currently, like what you guys do with the slips.
Okay. Anything else? Gene?
Yeah, I'd be concerned about derelict boats, derelict trailer boats that are left there. So you'd have to put something in the maybe a security deposit, or I'd hate to see the Harbor Department stuck with an old rusty boat, stuff like they're stuck there.
And my other is that my firm's been involved in marina developments that included dry storage and so on. And most of those operators find that by matter of policy, you don't get in there if you don't have insurance on your boat.
I agree. It's a good point.
It tends to sort things out. Okay, so Eric, you want to introduce us to the next one, number 2?
Thank you. That went pretty well. So hopefully the next one will go the same.
You're the one that put in 7 items.
Let's do it a different way next time. All 7 at once.
It's just things to consider. Next item, Goal 1D, Work Program 8, more drive-in walk-in movies at the Rock and/or Tidelands. As Bill, I'm sure, can attest, logistics and management of putting on these drive-in movies has been the challenge. It's been a lot of work, been great events, but doing it on an ongoing, continual basis is getting to be a bit much for staff and for all the volunteers. Net proceeds are about $2,000 per event, more or less. We haven't just pulled out, we've had to put some paid harbor staff on those events. I'm not pulling the harbor staff time cost out of that. That's just $2,000 net proceeds, or gross proceeds. And then the issues to consider, I guess we could focus mostly on the Rock, but I guess Tideland is a secondary. Drive-in, walk-in, or just walk-in only. Beck and I are having a conversation, well, I'm just making a walk-in movie, and everyone just parks off to the side. Then we don't have, a lot of the logistics are getting the cars in, and people wanting to get in the middle front row, and just the logistics of aiming the cars to the rows. Just tell everybody to park off to the side, and then you walk up and set up your camp chair or lounge chair or whatever. So maybe one way to think about how to manage it in the future. Do we want to use the beach for the seating? Let everybody go out and get their butts out on the beach, and then the movie's up on the parking lot. Gets a little more exposed weather-wise. As you know, weather was a concern last year, and hanging that rather tenuous and fragile big framework up with the screen on it can be a little scary if it's windy, and you never know what the weather's going to be like. And over towards the beach is going to be much more prone to weather, so that's something to factor in there. But it's an interesting concept. Instead of sitting in the dirt, we sit on the beach and have a little more comfortable spot. Radio broadcast versus a PA system. The last 2 times I think we've done it by radio through 97.3 The Rock, which has worked out okay, but it has its own challenges in terms of powering and logistics with that. Do we want to put in some sort of a permanent removable screen mounting system? In other words, some sort of receptacles in the ground that we can mount a framework into rather than doing the crane. It's been great with the crane service coming in and doing that for us, but as I said, the crane's proven a little difficult and a little tenuous hanging up there, especially if you get any wind. It gets a little bit on the scary side. Been great that Mike Myers has been doing that, but maybe another better way to go by putting some kind of plugs into the ground. Getting electricity to the equipment kind of feeds back to radio, audio broadcast, or PA system. We had to dig trenches in the ground and kind of bury extension cords to get power out to the equipment, which is a little tenuous and not the best way to do it. So powering it's always an issue. Do we want to go with a T-bid funded event organizer like T-bid has started to do with some events where they put out an RFP type project and say, this is the event we want to do, here's how much we want to pay you, folks come in and give us a proposal how you do it, and T-bid basically grants money for an event organizer to put the whole thing on from start to finish. That's one way of looking at it. Do we want to continue on with the staff and the Friends of the Harbor Department to continue to manage it, or do we want to just punt it over to the tourism manager to decide which way to do it and support however we can? And just like the Triangle Lot parking, destination of the proceeds, we've been putting it towards the Friends and putting it into the Friends coffers for the Friends to fund all the great things that they've been doing. So do we want to continue with that, or do we want to aim the funding somewhere else, or the proceeds somewhere else? And then getting and maintaining sponsorships, and that's really just sort of a placeholder on making sure we've got that on our radar screen to get and maintain sponsorships. But do we want to have a more robust sponsorship program and advertising where folks get a little more airtime or a little more play, and maybe that'll attract some more sponsorship. And the inevitable other.
So the way I'd like to start with this one is polling the board as to whether they think that the basic concept, which is the drive-in, walk-in movie at the Rock and/or Tidelands, is a worthwhile community event. Bill?
I definitely think it's a worthwhile community event. As you well know, I held the first one 2 years ago, and people came up to me and were astonished and flabbergasted and enjoyed it tremendously. Gene was there. I mean, most people that are sitting here were there. But it is a lot of work. A couple things in logistics, especially with the Rock, you got to get everyone out of there if you're going to do a drive-in movie. That's a logistic nightmare. So by 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, if you got cars, you're going to have to tow them out of there. So, I mean, it's a worthwhile venture, but it's a lot of work to do it. I would probably more in tune, say something like Tidelands Park, and to do a sit-down type of thing, and have someone like T-Bid run it. Only in the sense as I think there is some validity to this type of thing. Sponsorships is the key if you're going to make any money. I think paid attendance after your expenses and stuff like that, you're kind of going to, it's just not it's not really worth it. Now, I happen to be involved with Jennifer Little at T-Bid, and she went out to bid for the 12 Days of Christmas and with the Lighted Boat Parade. The Lighted Boat Parade now is a 2-day event. And T-Bid and the city hired Bayless Productions out of Pismo Beach to run both events. I think we should see how those events proceed this year and see what kind of job that she did. And I think it would be a consideration to hire someone, an event management company, to handle this thing. But to have the Harbor Department and their staff doing this, if you add the labor and the time, it'd be a money-losing operation. It really would be, especially at the Rock.
Dana?
Yeah, I was involved laying out the parking and seeing firsthand how this works. When you have a nonprofit doing an event with volunteers and they're having a hard time making any money, when you have more commercially driven and probably a lot more requirements put on you, I don't think it's worth it. And as far as Tidelands go, you're in a residential area. I live up on Cerrito Peak, and I can hear somebody making a phone call down there practically.
I think it's worthwhile, but I think that's a good point that somebody's got to want to continue to do this. I believe if you build it, they will come. And, if it was a more regular thing, I think people in this community, countywide, would like to come to Morro Bay and have something to do here. I would like somebody to maybe run it so that it still benefited the city in some way, but that it was something that was sustainable.
Lynn?
Yeah, the very first sentence on this tells me that we need, the very first sentence under this topic says that we need to find a different way to manage it, that if it's proven too much for staff to accomplish, and having talked with Bill over the difficulties before, you really need to do something drastically different in management or discontinue it, however sad that might be.
Pete?
After hearing the pros and cons and all of the work that it takes with the city and the volunteers to make this happen, after the first few efforts, did the attendance really justify the effort? That's what
Actually, the second event, the attendance was, I think, a little down. Wouldn't you say so, Gene? I mean, I think it was a novel approach, and we had surfing movies, and it was fun. I mean, I wouldn't mind doing it again. I think the biggest fear is the weather, really. I mean, you don't know if that winds are going to die down at 5 o'clock. You pray. But if it doesn't, you got some serious problems. And it was very cold. Gene, you were out there, and so were you, Ron. I mean, it was cold the last time. I mean, really. And so we got no one that came up to do the concessions. And that's the other thing where you make money, is the concessions. We had a great vendor there, South Bay Wild, unfortunately, who's no longer here. And I think you're right. We could build it, and people will come, but it takes a lot of work to build it, and I'm just not so sure with some of the obstacles that we have to entail, whether it's worth it. And we should put our labors to something a little bit better.
Gene?
Oh, I think it was a great community benefit. I mean, it brought people together, families, I mean, cars full of people. It was a great opportunity to have the community come together. Perhaps you just do it once every 5 years or something or other, but it was fun to do it, and I'd like to do it again. I just don't know how.
So, Eric, it sounds like the board thinks that there's community benefit. Some of us think it was fun, and that probably is a function of how much work we did. That it's weather is an issue, and personally, I think it's a city tourism deal. They want to move it forward. I liked your idea. I like the idea of putting up some permanent screen standards, and I think other things could be done with that as well. I mean, irrespective of where that would be, some 20, 25-foot poles or something like that. That's a good idea.
It sounds like time to discuss with Jennifer and maybe Erica and see if they want to start maybe trying to take it over. Gene's idea about maybe doing it periodically, because I think the attendance first year was a lot of us novelty, and if you do it every single year, and last year we did it in November, right? Well, first time around, did we do it in November? It's going to be it's always going to be a challenge. You think outdoors, it's going to be cool. It's going to be tough to get a comfortably warm night anytime around here, unless you get lucky enough like we did on Labor Day weekend, where you're out there sweating in humidity because you got tropical weather. But summertime, springtime, the wind is going to be a factor, and then fog. Wintertime, fall is your best chance, but it's such a gamble with the weather. So we'll bat it around with the tourism folks and see if it's something that they want to continue to, or at least get involved in, and see if they want to continue on with. Sounds like where we're at on this one, so we don't need to go down through each and every one.
Okay, just before we wrap this up, Neil has something you'd like to share with us?
Just briefly, everybody's listing off all these problems and trying to come up with solutions, and a lot of times, businesses who want to make money, they have to solve problems, and I think if you turn it over possibly and let somebody pay some licensing fee or something like that and let them be the ones to either sink or swim, solve the problem, then you might, remove our need to even comment on this stuff. If somebody
Well, as I say, FYI, Bayless Productions have been hired by the city of Morro Bay to run these next two events.
Okay.
So let's see how they do, and where they're going to make their money is sponsorships, period.
Okay, good point. 3.
Item 3, Goal 1D, number 10, leaseholder incentive, with the incentive being more years on the lease for a diversification of goods offered. And I believe this one was Neil's brainchild. So the idea being a standard incentive for more years. The standard incentive for more years on a lease is new improvements, redevelopment of a lease site, standard things like that, to amortize the investment. The questions to consider here, the issues to consider here, if we're going to move forward on something like this, is what constitutes a quote-unquote diversified caliber type of products that are lacking? Who determines that, and how is it monitored and enforced? The metrics, let's say we do come up with a definition or somehow determine what a diversified caliber type of products is and how we monitor and enforce it. What are the metrics for the years added versus the products or services offered? do we want to incentivize known wanted products or services? Such as, hey, we really want to, wish we had a shoe store down here on the waterfront. Let's incentivize that somehow. I just use that as a dumb example. Sorry, it's the best one I can come up with. And anything else. So I think the general approach on the city's management of the Tidelands Trust leases has been let the market decide what products or services are needed and let the businesses decide through supply and demand and provide it that way rather than the city get in the middle of it. The only real control the city has had is generally through its zoning and what types of general things it allows and doesn't allow. In other words, you can't open a gas station on the waterfront or certain other non-visitor serving businesses. That's the only real control we've ever had. So turn it over to Neil if he wants to.
Well, just a second. So the question before us is the topic of leaseholder incentive for diversification of goods offered. Leasehold incentives, goods offered. You wanted me to start with you last time, so you get to start.
I don't know why I'm such a target on this one. Yes, it was my idea, everybody, and you'll thank me maybe one day. I'm just trying to think outside the box and throw something against the wall and see what sticks. And I thought, maybe there's some businesses on the waterfront that are competing with the same business down the street, and maybe their business, who knows what their books look like, but maybe they would like to make a change and invest in what they're doing, but they don't have time on their lease and might not have the cash, and it might be a way for the city to incentivize some breath of fresh life for somebody to make a change and come up with some good idea. And maybe I oversimplified this in my thinking of it, but I still think conceptually there's got to be some value in this because it's just, the city only has so many things that it can negotiate with, and one of those is time. And if there's something that we can use that time to buy the city that would benefit the city, then I think we need to look at it. I don't necessarily have the answer. I just thought the discussion needed to happen.
And I will add, Lori just reminded me, we do have one similar incentive in one of our leases. It's at the Flying Dutchman lease site, where they've gotten a break on their rent for where the current slime meal buyer is, the hagfish buyer, as long as that is kept commercial fishing product buyer, a fishmonger, then they get a break. I don't know what it is, but they get a break on their annual rent if they keep it that. So,
as opposed to visitor serving?
As opposed to anything else, retail, add to the restaurant, whatever.
Well, it's good to know I'm not reinventing the wheel.
Okay. Gene?
Well, as I mentioned, I think it was last month, there was a lease site holder who had in his lease site, he had to provide some maritime experience to his lease, and that was removed from his lease agreement. And I think that's going backwards. I kind of feel like the maritime feeling, the working waterfront needs to be encouraged. And so I'd hate to see shoe stores brought in or something like that line. So I'm encouraging, if there's going to be diversity, it has to lean towards maritime use of some kind.
Okay. Pete?
I agree with that. The working waterfront and the fact that the old location for Morro Bay Fish is still being encouraged to. I've wondered recently, how are they hanging on the slime meal facility? In recent times, things have been pretty tough for them. I'm wondering just recently whether or not that buying station would even stay open. No, I'm talking about
The one at the Dutchman.
the one at the Dutchman, formerly Bay Shores.
Yeah, it was Bay Shores Fisheries before.
With the recent events, and the number of slime meal fishermen shrinking here in the harbor, that was a concern.
And I don't know if the owner there provides a reduced rent for the usage of that, or he's willing to provide it. Or that he knows he can rent it for a higher and make more money on it as a standard retail or add restaurant space to it or something. But the city's incentivized him by giving him lower rent to keep the fish buyer in there. I don't know which cart is before the horse or horse before the cart on that, but that's what the incentive is on that one. And it's obviously commercial fishing related.
Number one, I think Well, yeah, all right, working waterfront and incentives to keep fishermen around, I think would be of prime consideration to maintain our identity as a fishing port. For the city to decide that some other product, well, maybe that would be the product, but to decide between a restaurant and a shoe store wouldn't make any sense to me at all.
In what way would it not make sense to you?
I would rather see that kind of a decision left up to the market. But if you are you're incentivizing because of the identity of the harbor, the working waterfront idea, that would be worthwhile.
Ooh, nicely put. Yeah. Dana?
Yeah, we've discussed this before in the Working Waterfront Ad Hoc Committee and as a priority, and this is a good place to put it. Anything else, I think, would be overregulating. I agree that the sales drives the market, but if there's going to be any incentives, it would definitely, we want to maintain the working waterfront aspect.
Bill?
I would agree. Incentivize working waterfront and fishing. The marketplace will dictate itself. We can't dictate what goes into any establishment, I mean, as far as I know of. I mean, so.
And speaking for the board, Eric, I think when we are referring as it relates to this item to working waterfront, we're not relegating that just to the Measure D area.
Yeah, I get that. I wasn't
I'm
viewing
sure,
it that way.
I'm sure you were. It was mostly for
And I'm
folks that are watching. So
I'm going to throw another example at you. The Myers Boatyard, which is an interesting one to incentivize when we're working on a parallel path to possibly wipe that out if we build a full-service boatyard.
yeah.
I think you'll always have a possibility for a boutique boatyard. I mean, they can only do one boat at a time, and they have their marina there. There could always be a possibility there.
Okay, just want to throw that out there.
Okay, I think we're done with that one.
Okay.
Well, on the Myers Boatyard, the lease site is from the bulkhead out for the slips. The boatyard itself is free property, yes.
Private property.
Yeah, but you need the lease, obviously, to operate the yard.
Okay, number 4, please.
Okay, item 4, goal, again, 1D, number 11, seek and establish a more effective grant-seeking process. Just some points of clarification or points of order on this one. We do and continually seek regular Department of Boating and Waterways grant funding. In fact, we're going to council next meeting to approve, or do we just go to council on the 12th to approve another derelict vessel grant? Equipment grants we go for all the time. We got the launch ramp grant. We avail ourselves of DBW a lot. Cable committee, the same thing for going to DC, and the ice machine, we continue to go to them for that. I've recently tasked our administrative technician to seek and follow up on new grant leads. The city has engaged with a grant consultant. There's a lot of them out there, and the city's engaged with one, and generally they get paid out of the grants themselves, the management of it. They go find you grants and help you apply for them, and they build their cost into the grant, so that's where they generally get paid from. And that grant consultant's already identified a couple of harbor-related opportunities. Most of them are DBW grants, which we already know about, but they're still looking for others, and they came across a few others. So I've got our administrative tech looking at those. So that's what we're doing right now in terms of grant seeking. As far as coming to the board for input, about the only input I'd be looking for is does the HAB members wish to try and engage in grant seeking and bring things to our attention, like, you know, Dana, you've done recently, and through that one grant that we became aware of, you've done some research on that. Or is there other ideas you've got for grant seeking opportunities for the city?
Question before we discuss it here. this grant consultant that the city has engaged? Do you know what the term of their engagement is?
I do not.
Are you confident that the Harbor Department is getting its fair share of the consultant's attention, given that they work presumably for all city departments?
I'd probably say it's too early to tell yet. I don't know what other opportunities they've identified that the city may be pursuing, so I can look at it. Another way to answer that is to sort of look at it and on the citywide perspective and see what they've done for police and fire and public works, and if we're just getting the tail end of it, or don't know. Pretty early on, I got a couple emails came through the interim finance director. He's the one that's managing it. Some leads that they had dug up, so those came pretty early on to the grant seeker's tenure. So
Okay.
At this point, I think we are.
Okay, well, the Harbor Director has shared some details with us about how the department manages grant seeking. That's the first 3 bullets. So that would seem to me to bring the board to the 4th bullet, which is other. As a body or as an individual board member, does anybody have any other ideas for how the Harbor Department might pursue grants, Bill?
Well, what we're doing right now is that the Friends of the Harbor Department, of course, that aligns themselves with the supplemental funding of the Harbor Department, we're introducing the public to the fleet of Morro Bay. When I say that is the boats that we have to help save lives. And we're in the process of putting a coordinated campaign together to try to raise some money to buy a new boat. So and Dana Stein, who has also been mentioned earlier, is working with us in obtaining grants and some other sources of funding for that very purpose, so that we don't have to go into our general fund or in our reserves to buy this new boat when we need it, which so we all as individuals can, research grant opportunities and bring it to the Harbor Department, and that's what we're doing as part of the Friends.
Dana?
Yeah, having recently looked at grants from NOAA, it's not exactly my skill set, but it just seems like our location, and as a harbor town, that we might be kind of ripe for funding through different agencies. So as far as other, I don't know, but I'm really happy to see that the Harbor Department is working harder at finding grants.
Neil?
Every year, there's new legislation that opens up different funding for different areas, and I think that having somebody who's constantly looking for these new and upcoming grant possibilities is important. So knowing that the city's doing this, I don't have anything else to add to other.
Lynn? Pete?
I don't have anything to add to other.
Okay, thank you. Jen?
Oh, I don't think I'd rely on just a consultant. I'd keep the Harbor Department, they're on their feet on the ground looking for grants all the time. So keep at it. And we had Joe Wood from the Recreation Department. He was excellent in finding grants, and I think Eric's doing a good job also. So.
Okay. I would, as it relates to the city's consultant, Mr. Director, I would encourage the Harbor Department to ask that consultant for a monthly report on what activity it's engaged in specifically to benefit the Harbor Department.
Okay, I'll add our legislative consultant over in Washington, D.C., Carpy and Clay, through our representative in Washington, D.C. that we go visit every year. On a pretty regular basis, she sends me harbor, waterfront, dredging, other related potential federal grant, obviously because she's in D.C. Occasionally she gets some state things, California state things, because she's also active here in this state. But we also we're made aware of some opportunities from her every once in a while too, which is good. Nothing that's been worth looking further into, but she brings it to our attention.
My comment about getting a report, the department getting a report from the consultant, was prompted by what Neil said, in part. And the report, I would respectfully suggest the report, if you get one, is not just what have you done for us today, but where have you looked? Okay, number 5, please.
Okay, fifth and final, that's a different goal this time, goal 3E. I think I need to read the actual goals, I haven't been. Identify facilities in need of or opportunities for projects lending themselves to volunteer. The goal doesn't say this, but this is kind of what we've named it, adopt a thing participation. As you know, there's adopt the trees and adopt the benches. There's mit-mut adoption things that have happened here in town, so there's other opportunities for service or other organizations to get involved or individuals to get involved in helping the city either do individual projects or adopt ongoing maintenance and other things. The Deputy City Manager, Ikani Tiamotu, has recently been tasked with identifying these projects and opportunities, and he kind of keeps the list of projects and organizations that are interested, and then linking those opportunities together. And let's say, I'll just use Rotary as an example, and there's some city park that needed some sort of adopt-a-park participation, and Rotary is, told them 2 months ago, yeah, we're really interested in doing something in one of the city's parks, and all of a sudden a park opportunity comes up. He'll link those two together and then route them to the most logical department head that would be handling that project and let them run with it. So that's currently a process which is relatively new here in the city and is moving forward. The issues to consider are project hard cost funding sources. Obviously, labor is the major thing you're looking for, but there's hard costs to some of these things, and I know we talked about maybe restroom refurbishment. Maybe we can find some local construction folks or others that want to help us refurb some of our restrooms. Well, they're not going to want to pay for tile and grout and everything else. Where does the funding come from? I think in the Harbor Fund, obviously, it would pay for harbor-related things, but funding sources are something to look at. And then project management and work oversight. Simple projects would require very little oversight, but a heavier duty construction project or something along those lines is going to require a fair amount more of oversight and staff time to deal with. And at what point is it worth it or not worth it to try and do this as a volunteer basis project?
So I presume that for our purposes, item number 5 relates to the harbor.
Correct.
Okay. Dana.
Well, you brought up bathrooms, and it seems to be something. Yeah, you brought up bathrooms, and evidently that is part of the Harbor Department's job as far as taken care of now on the, at least there by Tognazzini's. So I don't know how you can do this. I mean, if you're looking for volunteers, yeah,
I guess what we're looking, the goal is identify facilities in need or opportunities for projects lending themselves to adopt a thing participation. I don't think we're looking necessarily for the groups and putting them together and managing it, but what opportunities do we have out there on the waterfront that we can maybe get some volunteer groups involved with, whether they're ongoing mit-mut type things or adopt a park things like you guys do at the yacht club down at Tidelands, or are they one-offs, a restroom project, a bench project at the Rock, put up the movie screen thing, whatever. That's what we're looking for.
well, I think that's a good idea. And then just see, we could make up a list.
That's what we're here to do.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to do it right now, but I mean, if there's some benches or something that you want to put on the wharf or something, that's something that's a possibility. I just don't see outside of the bathrooms, which you already talked about, that kind of job. You know, there is that idea of like barn raising where people just come together and do stuff, but you can't do that. No, not in the building industry, not anymore, especially for a public works type job. There's way too much involved. That's why it costs way more than normal. So I'm not sure how to do this.
You?
I think this is a great idea. I think limiting the scope so that you don't get into projects where you have to have a lot of oversight might be important. And if somebody has a larger project, they can propose it and maybe bring that to us or planning. But I think that the bathrooms are crucial. I look at what a volunteer group has done at the corner of Beach Street and Embarcadero with those red flowers and then the planter box as you go into that parking lot. It's beautiful. And that's the first thing you see when you come down Beach Street. And I think if that's spread out on the Embarcadero into the parks and towards the beach and possibly even in the beach parking lots, I think that, boulders are great, but it might be nice to have some other things over there that are attractive to people when they come to a beach. And on the highway, when you adopt something, you typically have a placard that says that this area is represented by this group. And so some recognition for a volunteer group, I think, would go hand in hand with that work that they did.
Lynn?
Yes, in order to construct such a list, I think you first have to decide what kind of projects adopt a thing is appropriate for. And most of those will be probably repetitive and relatively simple, not requiring a whole lot of expertise, thus not requiring a lot of oversight. As far as making a list, I don't know, I think I'd have to do a lot more walking up and down the Embarcadero to identify things that would fall into that kind of a category. And then, of course, looking to various groups in town and approaching them, perhaps, to adopt whatever projects you can find. Planting might be one of them. Planting is fairly simple, and most of us can do it. So,
Well, again, the deputy city manager's been tasked with sort of keeping the list of groups and potential projects. If I'm perfectly willing, if you've got some ideas here, I'll mark them down and we'll get them over to the deputy city manager. But if you want to take some more time and say walk the waterfront, and that's a perfectly logical way of looking at it and identifying things and seeing them, send me the list and I'll forward that stuff on, and we'll just give him a list of, hey, here's the things we've identified that could possibly be taken up, and he may find the group that's most logical to do that with.
Pete?
Most recently saw the planning going on. I think it's a great thing. If I was to add anything to the list, possibly with the adopt a thing idea, basic light maintenance. It's something I do a lot of. I think volunteer groups, something that's fairly simple and straightforward would be a good idea. That's about all I have to say.
Gene?
Oh, maybe something like an adopt a boat or adopt a pier or adopt a harbor patrolman, something like that.
Okay, Dana?
Yeah, I'm remembering now also a group that you might want to think about are the Scouts, because I know I've seen a kiosk that was done down at the lawn tramp, I believe, maybe by an Eagle Scout for a project, something like that. So there's
Yeah, that was the
group.
Black Brant, a little information kiosk, and it was one of the Black Brant hunter's sons
yeah.
earning some scout badge, so that was his project, to do a scout badge of some sort. But we are with our changing our shark warning and notification protocol, looking at redoing all of our waterfront signs and, getting rid of those ones that were just 2 signs to begin with and now have turned into giant Christmas trees again, and revamping those and do more of a kiosk approach, and that might be an opportunity for that sort of thing as well. I'll put that on the list.
Another potential group, which, although that's not what we were asked to do, and I'm keen off of what Dana said with the Scouts, there's a Sea Scout flotilla. It's slow. I've always wondered why we don't see them in Morro Bay.
There used to be some.
Yeah, but it's in slow these days, and
Yeah, there's been a
the last time
flotilla
they had a
here.
boat- the last time they had a boat,
comes and
they
goes.
chased it to San Francisco or something. I'm a little confused. But anyway, it'd be nice to get the Sea Scout, if there is an active flotilla, re-engaged in Morro Bay. Gene?
Now, one of the groups might be the Coast Guard Auxiliary.
That's a quality idea.
One of the groups might be the waterfront leaseholders, and the city manager might reach out to them. they already have staff possibly cleaning their own personal bathrooms in the restaurants and businesses on the waterfront. They might be able to help.
This isn't exactly germane to number 5, and the message needs to go to the deputy city manager, not to the harbor director, but being a member of a couple of nonprofits that over the years have provided various volunteer activities and services within the city, historically, hopefully that is not going to be the case moving forward or presently. Historically, getting the cooperation and attention of the city, which by definition always is necessary because it's city property unless it's private property, has not been easy. Not been easy. So, in some we're like adopt a dock, adopt a restroom, and the people don't have to you can adopt one. I mean, I've adopted things in the past where I didn't touch anything, I just gave them money. So hopefully Connie's, when he's not just looking for volunteer groups, hopefully he's also looking for some sort of a funding project as well. Okay, anything else on this? Okay.
I'd just like to put a plug in for Morro Bay and Bloom, because I'm pretty sure they're the ones who've been planning everything.
They don't plant everything. They plant the red flowers. There's 2 organizations in town, Morro Bay Beautiful and Morro Bay and Bloom. Morro Bay and Bloom did do the geraniums down on the waterfront. Absolutely. Okay, so that brings us to item D, declaration of future agenda items. Does anybody on the board have in mind to propose to declare a future agenda item? Pete.
Recently, a member of the Commercial Fishermen's Association asked that we identify a loading and unloading zone at every dock or tie-up facility. There's a couple that are in place, and there's a couple spots where there isn't anything. And I was asked to bring that up.
Okay. Is that something, Mr. Director, do you think that you and Public Works can discuss?
I think that's something I can Public Works. I don't think I need to get Harbor Advisory Board input on it. We do have a couple of our sets of slips have some loading zones. A couple probably don't. So that's something we can look at with Public Works folks to see if we want to try and establish something. That's
one of the most challenging ones is next to Giovanni, the dock set of Giovanni's.
Yeah,
those guys
are a tough spot. Like 4 spots there, and everybody wants one.
Yeah, it's a tough spot. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Okay, moved and seconded by either one of these gentlemen. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Carries. Thank you. Thank you all.